Parvati Parameshwara. A very warm good morning to all those who are assembled via Zoom app for the international webinar organized by IQAC, Government Sanskrit College, Trivandrum. Today, we have two illuminary stars in the field of knowledge, that is Dr. Dominic Goodall and Professor G. Gangadharan Nair sir, to deliver their topic. Now, I humbly invite Dr. P. Rajesh Kumar, the convener of IQAC, to deliver the welcome speech. Sir. Rajesh sir. Hello.
Yeah, I'm here. Hello. കേൾക്കുന്നുണ്ടോ? Namaste and good morning to all of you. Today is the second day of the international webinar on the topic Emerging Trends in Sanskrit Research, organized by IQAC of Government Sanskrit College, Trivandrum. We have two dignitaries as guests for the day, and one of our family members as the paper presenter for this session. Dr. Goodall is a scholar in Indology. By birth, he is not an Indian, but when we look at his academic life and his service to the area of Indology and Sanskrit, I would say he is Indian and more than an Indian. He has spent a lot of time to learn Sanskrit, Tamil, Indology, and many other areas, including Shaivism. Now he is at the French Institute, Pondicherry, as director. Actually, Dr. Varkedi sir has suggested and recommended his name, and I sent an email to him that you were recommended and suggested by Dr. Varkedi, and with no hesitation, he has accepted our invitation. And after that, quite a few times, we had interaction via WhatsApp and phone calls, and he is here to deliver his paper on the topic Textual Criticism and History of Shaivism. As our keynote speaker was expressing the areas or concerns over the emerging areas that needs concern and serious attention for Sanskrit and Indology, I think this topic is most relevant for the time. With respect and love, on behalf of the Sanskrit fraternity gathered here and Government Sanskrit College, Trivandrum, I express very warm and cordial welcome to you, Dr. Goodallji. Dr. Gangadharan Nair, who needs no words to introduce himself, is a man who has dedicated his life for teaching Sanskrit and promotion and propagation of Sanskrit and his Shastras. That would be the reason he was honored by India, by the President of India, for having his contribution to Sanskrit and Indology. He is a rich man in terms of his disciples and students all over the world. Every institution or every college or every university, even some non-academic institutions also, he has thousands and thousands of disciples and students. When I was talking to him to deliver the paper, I requested him to share some of his experience in the West, especially Western universities, and what are the upcoming related to the Sanskrit studies and Indological research in Western universities. and he has agreed to do that. Today, he is going to present the paper on the paradigm shift in Sanskrit and Indological research. In fact, the thrust area of the topic for this webinar would be addressed by Dr. Gangadharan Nair. He will be joining us very shortly. On behalf of all of you gathered here virtually, on behalf of the Government Sanskrit College Trivandrum, I would express my warm and cordial welcome to you, sir. Today, Dr. Pradeep Verma is here. He is one of our family members. He is the head of the Department of Vyakarna, Government Sanskrit College Trivandrum. He is also going to present a paper in this session. Dr. Harinarayan is here to express vote of thanks. I welcome him as well. Those who are joined here for this webinar virtually in time, I would express warm and cordial welcome to all of you. And without lagging, we may go to the session. I conclude my welcome speech by this. Thank you all.
A warm welcome to the convener too, shall we all. Now I invite Dr. Dominic Guda to present his paper, and we are eagerly waiting to hear your scholarly words. Sir, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the warm invitation to speak on this occasion. I should just correct one small piece of information. I'm not the director of the famous French Institute of Pondicherry. I'm the head of another center called the École Française d'Extrême-Orient. Which is about a kilometer away, also engaged in researches and collaborating for many years with the French Institute of Pondicherry. I hope you can all see the screen. I'm speaking today on the textual criticism and the history of Shaivism. If you'll give me a moment, I'm just going to close the windows because the noise here has suddenly got very loud. So normally when I speak in the past, when I've spoken to people from Trivandrum Sanskrit College has a long association with our office. Professor Venkataraja Sharma was here, and now still Dr. S.S. Sharma. And so over the years, I have had many occasions when I've been invited to say a few words, and usually I speak about the Raghuvamsha because of a long-running project to edit Vallabhadeva's commentary on the Raghuvamsha. But this time, I thought I would speak about something else, since the seminar is really about emerging trends. I don't know whether this is an emerging trend exactly, but it's a terribly important thing for the future. Editing more of the enormous corpus of Sanskrit literature. And the one area in which I have some knowledge built up over the years, about which I can speak, is Shaivism. I put various other logos here. These are projects funded by the European Research Council, which some of these research activities I'm going to speak about are funded through them. Yes, so text criticism. When we think about Sanskrit texts, very often we think about them like this. That's to say, they're in Devanagari, traditionally edited in this bulky format, imitating manuscript, palm leaf manuscript format. And as you see, there are no variants at all. This is simply the text, as though it could come down to us like this magically over a thousand years or more. But of course, this is not really the way it is. So what is textual criticism? I think that in many Indian universities, I hear that textual criticism is rather disapproved of as a research activity, as though it were simply a mechanical reading of the manuscripts with no critical appraisal. But in fact, in order to edit a text, of course, you need to think about what it means. You cannot really expect simply to copy without understanding, and for that to be an edition. Editing often requires an enormous amount of judgment and knowledge of the field, reading in related literature and so forth. There are, of course, some texts which do come down to us in a single source. So this is just an example that concerns me very closely, because for the last 30 years or a little bit more, I have been editing from time to time parts of this enormous text called the Nishwasa Tattva Samhita. And the manuscript you see here is from the 9th century. And in this particular manuscript, this is the only old manuscript. There are a few manuscripts that have been copied from this particular manuscript in the 20th century, but they are don't give any independent access to the text. And so this 9th century manuscript gives us all we have of the Nishwasa. And I think there are 114 folios. And so far in what we've published, we've covered the first 44. And that takes 2 very large volumes, and as I say, has taken 30 years. So it's a lot of work, even if you have a single source. It's very often likely that it will have gaps, that it will have damage, that it will have problems that you can only repair through parallels. And so even editing a thing from a single source is a complicated procedure. So I'm just going to mention briefly one of the projects, the European Research Council projects, the Dharma project, has led us into editing a similar text, similar in the sense that we only have one manuscript for most of the text, and it is this palm leaf manuscript from Nepal, copied in, I think, 938, but I'm just going to check. Yes, equivalent. Well, no, the text is written in 938. The manuscript looks like it might be 11th century. Only one copy, and so we have to work very, very carefully thinking about parallels. And it's a very interesting text for the history of Shaivism, because it seems to be the oldest surviving paddhati. And a number of us are therefore carefully working through this text, trying to repair what is broken, trying to interpret what is easily readable, and making small corrections to the manuscript. It is a long process, even though we have only one manuscript. So text criticism, in other words, is very much more than simply copying from manuscripts. It involves reading the manuscripts and trying to read them with understanding, trying to understand the mistakes they made, and to restore to, as far as possible, an earlier state of text, typically the moment when that particular work was written. Yes, this paddhati is very much quoted, and these are the parts which survive these chapters. It's called the Naimittika Kriyanusandhana. Of course, we're well aware that even traditional looking editions also actually have variants. It's not as if the first example I showed you was an edition which displayed no variation in transmission. But any Purana, Kurma Purana here taken at random, is bound to be transmitted in many, many manuscripts, perhaps hundreds of manuscripts. And of course, there are lots of variations. And to edit a text critically means to try to consider all of those variants and try to consider how the text should have been at some earlier moment in its existence, like its point of origin. That's the most common. And you can see, so all of these notes at the bottom here are giving us variants. So here we see the word Vikurvana 11. So we look down and we see Vikurvaka iti pa. This, of course, this format of giving variants is something that reminds us that text criticism is not new. This is a very standard way that medieval commentators already used to indicate variation. Iti partantaram, iti partaha. In other words, text criticism is not some newfangled thing invented from the West and imported, which I think some people sometimes believe as an attitude. There are differences. I think that medieval commentators typically can only tell you, I have seen this reading in some other source, but hence this formulation, iti partantaram. But a critical edition, a modern critical edition, will very often try to tell you not just it's this or that reading exists, but will try to tell you which particular source that reading is to be found in. So if this is from an edition of the Kirana Tantra, if I choose a particular part, so for instance, this is verse 9 of this chapter, and each part is 9a, 9b, 9c, and 9d, 4 parts. So if we look in the apparatus here, we see 9c. Instead of 9c, as you see, 9c reads Ashuddha Pudgalo Pyevam. 9c, read like that, is in all of these different sources. So MY is a manuscript, RN is a manuscript, PS3 is a manuscript, and so forth. All of these are manuscripts. And then we find this variant, instead of that 9c, instead of Ashuddha Pudgalo Pyevam, we see in N, we see the reading Shuddhakam Pudgalatmaivam, quite different. And so on, other variants. So in G1 and this commentator Trivandrum Shambhu, we see Shuddhakam Pudgalopyevam, and so on. So the difference, I think, between older text criticism and newer text criticism is that we now have libraries that are a little bit more stable, and so we can say this manuscript situated in this particular library, so this is MY's Mysore, that manuscript has this reading. We can allocate, don't need to just say iti partantaram, we can say this is in this particular manuscript, and then we can draw up some kind of impression of how the manuscripts work. So in this particular case, this is we have manuscripts, on the left here, I put a dating scale. So 924, the earliest manuscript from Nepal, is dated and belongs to the beginning of the 10th century. The latest manuscript here down here is from Madras, hence M1, and is dated to 1927. So we have an enormous range of manuscripts, and we can have some ideas about how the manuscripts are related. And that means that instead of just saying there are these and those Partantrani, we can say in Nepal in the 10th century there was this Partha, and in South India in 1927 there was this Partha. So that's really one of the key differences about between text criticism as practiced earlier and as we can now practice it today, as I say, because of the stability of libraries, the ability to travel around and see different manuscripts, the ability to photograph them, and so have accurate representations of what they will represent. And because of catalogues, like the catalogues of different manuscript libraries, we can identify where all the manuscripts are. And so in a way which was not possible for many centuries, it's now possible for me to find all these different manuscripts transmitting the Kirana Tantra and photograph them, compare their readings for every single line of the text, and then produce an apparatus like the one I showed you, in which we can record absolutely every detail that we wish, that we think is pertinent, that is relevant. It becomes very technical and complicated to look at because one is trying to compress as much information as possible in keeping it clear, but keeping it in a small compass so that you don't have the whole book taken over by lots and lots of little tiny notes. So if there is a new, if this is a new trend, an emerging trend, I would say that it's not because it's a new phenomenon. I think that people have always understood that texts transmitted to us from the past can undergo change. And if we are lucky and if we are careful and if we think, we can reverse the changes. That's to say, when damage occurs, we can, by applying common sense and gaining access to source materials, we can repair damage or changes introduced into the text. And this is a vast field because Sanskrit literature is vast. I don't need to tell you that. So this is just one tiny branch, the history of Shivism, which is itself is a pretty huge branch, in fact. And there are many, 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 many texts out there, as you know. And so in a way, we should all be trying to contribute to improving this material before it is lost, before the manuscripts fade away. So here's another project which I've been doing now for some 25 years, an edition of a text called the Sarva Jnanottara Tantra, which I believe is very important. This is from an unpublished edition. This is a rather famous chapter from the Sarva Jnanottara, involving a yogic meditation where the sadhaka is to identify himself with Shiva. Ahameva paro devaha sarva mantramaya Shiva sarva mantra vyatitascha srishti samhara varjitaha. And then you see a great big block of commentary. That is the commentary of Aghora Shivacharya, who flourished in Trivandrum in 1157. And then the text of the Tantra continues, Maya vyaptam idam sarvam drishya drisham characharam. So you might be a bit surprised to see drishya drisham instead of, if you look here, so 29b in the apparatus, drishya drisham. This is the reading of N1, a 9th century manuscript from Nepal. And all the other sources which I've collated here have drishya drishyam. The meaning is the same. Drishya drishyam is an archaic form which is not a standard that you would find in dictionaries. Visible and invisible is of course the meaning. But this drishya drishyam is archaic and very likely authorial. That is to say, very likely was part of the original text. And we have this ancient manuscript N1, which I will show you in a second. The Sarva Jnanottara, just as an aside, I should mention that it is an important text which has slid a little bit into oblivion, but we find references to it in, for instance, Cambodian inscriptions, these two chosen to illustrate the point. Here, it's probably rather difficult for you to read, but that says Sarva Jnanottara Dishu, here at the beginning of this little section in side. So there's the two passages that I've just shown you typed out in modern transliteration. So the second one you see is about an acharya who is called in the inscription Shivacharya. Tasyasye samhita sarvas sarvajnanottaradayaha sarvajñam ivadityanto tisthiras tasthire bhi. So in his mouth, Tasyasye, all the samhitas were there, beginning with the Sarva Jnanottara. So clearly he chooses the Sarva Jnanottara not because it's the beginning of any normal list, but because this enables him to then make a pun with Sarvajñam ivadityantyah. So these samhitas were there in his mouth as though wishing to bestow dityantyah, Sarvajñam, omniscience, on his mind. They were there stably, atisthiraha, and stood there, tasthiri, they remained there. So for the Sarva Jnanottara, one of the complications is that there is no one single manuscript that has the entire text from the beginning to the end. What we have instead is fragments here and there, and we have various broken and disordered sources which give the commentary of the 12th century Acharya, Aghora Shiva. And so in order to edit, one of the reasons why editing the Sarvagyanotara has so far taken me 25 years and I haven't yet published anything of it, is because I have all these different fragments and it's like a massive jigsaw puzzle. I have to fit them all together in different ways. And crucial in this proceeding is the Sarvagyanotara Vritti of Aghora Shiva, which you see here, a Grantha manuscript, which is kept in Trivandrum. So one of the reasons for showing it to you is that the Trivandrum Sanskrit College is very often present in my mind for all kinds of reasons. Trivandrum is an important place. I think the manuscript itself probably comes from Madurai, because every now and then when there's a gap, the scribe has written things like Namo Meenakshi Sundaryai and so forth. So, and then there are other, this is a very fragmentary source. It just has a few chapters. So this is kept in the French Institute of Pondicherry, the IFP. As you see, it's a modern book with faint lined paper written in Grantha. And here is the manuscript of, from Nepal, which seems to be 9th century. And I'm showing the leaf with just the same portion on it, I hope. Yes, I don't know how easy it is for you to see this lettering used in the Kathmandu Valley in the 9th century is quite close to Nagari as it was then evolving. You can see here, Aham Eva Paro Deva, no ending, Sarva Mantramaya Shivaha, Sarva Mantra Vyatitascha, Srishti Samhara Varjitaha. And then instead of Maya, he's made a mistake. He's written Yaya Vyaptam Idam Sarvam. And then you can see this is Drisha. Here, this little hook in the top of the line is the A. Drisha Drisham Characham. So, in fact, this section of the Sarvagyanotara is very famous, and there have been no less than 3 editions of the Sarvagyanotara, but they all cover a tiny portion which corresponds to about 3 or 4 chapters, depending on how you divide up the chapters. One of the features of this very early period is that you do not have chapter colophons. I should have found a picture to show you that, but we simply get little circles or little florets, what you might call pushpika, which may well be the origin of the expression patala pushpika. But there's nothing to say, iti sarvagyanotri mahatantri, such and such a chapter. That doesn't occur. There are, however, some 30 chapters that have not been published of the Sarvagyanotara at all. And many of these chapters are of huge interest from the point of view of the history of various aspects of the Shiva religion. And so just to give you one example, I've chosen something about lingas. So you may think that every linga looks the same, but one of the things, however, that is odd about the descriptive literature and prescriptive literature about the Shastra, about lingas, is how very uniform it is on the whole, and how it tends to describe the kind of linga that you see here on the left. That's to say, something relatively highly geometric, with a square base, an octagonal middle section, and a round top. So there are, of course, other kinds of lingas that are referred to, notably Bana lingas and Swayambhu lingas, which follow other prescriptions. But when you look at old lingas, you find that there is an enormous variety of forms, and these are not really reflected in most of the texts. So just if I flip through, sorry, I'm going to come back again, so I think I have the things in the wrong order here, really. This is the kind of classical linga that we would all be used to seeing, except that, of course, normally in a temple, the base is covered and the pindika covers the middle section, and all you see is what's called the puja bhaga. So just to tell you again what I mean, here you see this, this is in Cambodia. So in Cambodia, in around the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th centuries, it becomes very standardized. Square Peter, this is a deposit stone, so Ratnanyasa has been performed in those cavities. And then we have the square section. Here is the octagonal section, and here is the cylindrical section. And the base of the pita covers all of the square section and most of the octagonal section, the rest of which is covered by this, which in many Shiva sources is known as the Pindika, as distinguished from the pita, which is underneath it. And if you look at different descriptions in a lot of Agamic texts, you will find that the linga types are differentiated and they have very rounded sounding names, like Kukutanda, the chicken's egg, Chhatra, the umbrella, and Trapusha, I suppose Trapusa, a sort of cucumber or something, and Ardha Chandra, the half moon. But when you measure out the way these things are actually described, as has been done here in this edition of the Ajita Tantra, you find that the descriptions all approximate to something very highly stylized, very geometrical, with a lot of straight lines. The first one, at least to me, looks absolutely nothing like a Kokutanda, nor does this Chhatra look like a Chhatra. Ardha Chandra, of course, nothing like an Ardha Chandra. I think that so I think that what has happened is that there has been a very strong tendency through time to geometricize the linga and to flatten the curves so that it becomes more and more an abstraction. If we look at old lingas, so here's one outside the Atirana Chandeshwara shrine. We know its name because of the digraphic inscription. That's the same inscription in South Indian letters derived from Brahmi, and North Indian letters of a sort of Nandi Nagari type, the old Nagari, or Siddhamatrika, that kind of lettering. So it's a bit confusing which linga was originally in this cave shrine, but you can see this one has a round section here, comes a long way down, and then the very bottom that's visible, that seems to be 16-sided, and here this is 32-sided. Or maybe this is 32 and this is 64, I'm not sure. In any case, it does not conform to what we find in almost all the literature. Actually, inside the Adirana Chandeshwara shrine, you find this linga, which is faceted all the way up from the bottom to the top. This, again, does not correspond to what we would expect from prescriptive literature. If we go to Cambodia, we see all of these different types of lingas. The one on the left is commoner in the later periods, and in the early period, what they call the pre-Angkorian period, that's to say, before the great capital became firmly established in this place we now call Angkor. And you can see that several of these, bottom right, for example, I would say that this looks like a Kukutanda to me. And some of these other ones, I think that they might be the type which the Sarvagyanotara refers to as Mridanga. And if we go elsewhere, South India, we find other linga types which definitely do not fit the geometricized descriptions that we find in most Agamic literature. And here, I think another one which you could see as a sort of Kukutanda, if you like. Okay, so that's the phenomenon of lingas through time. If we return now to this passage of the Sarvagyanotara, you can see that it says here, Chaturashram adhobhagam ashtashram madhyatastitam vrittam chaiva tadodhantu prakurvita shadanana. Shadanana, okay, this text is addressed to Skanda, and so every now and then there is a sambodhanam, a vocative, shadanana. And what we're being told is one should make prakurvita, this linga, chaturashram adhobhagam. Its bottom part, adhobhagam, should be four-sided, so this is what we see here on the left. Ashtashram madhyatastitam. In the middle, it should be with 8 facets, ashtashram. Vrittam chaiva tadodhantu, and above that, it should be round. This is exactly what we see. And then, yes, suvishuddhasya lingas kukutanda samasya. But if we look now in the apparatus, so verse 52, you can see here, chaturashram adhobhagam ashtashram madhyatastitam in the apparatus. These are, and that Trivandrum manuscript is T. T1 is the Pondicherry manuscript, which I haven't yet shown you. TE is a Telugu script manuscript, which I haven't shown you. D1 and L are also Telugu, copied from Telugu script manuscripts. And this N1 is our 9th century. And instead of Chaturashram Adhobhagam Ashtashram Madhyatastitam, it just has Chaturashram Adhobhagam. Similarly, the next half verse, Vrittam Chaiva, so 53, Vrittam Chaiva Tadurdhantu Prakurvita Sharanana. So here N1 simply has Prakurvita Sharanana. So what is the difference? N1 has omitted Ashtasham Madhyatastitam Vrittam Chaiva Tadurdhantu. In other words, if you just have N1, I hope you can sort of see here. Chaturashram Adhobhagam Prakurvita Tatanam. So the Sambodhana is mistaken for a Pratama, that's a common mistake. Sharanana. So Vishuddhasya Lingasya Kukutanda Samasya tu. In other words, what the Sarvaganottara seems to be describing is, I think, much closer to this Kukutanda shape. We have no intervening section. We have a square section at the bottom, and then straight away, well, that's it. We have a square section, and then this pure linga, so we should say linga, which of a pure linga, which is equal to a chicken's egg, Kukutanda Samasya, we have a square section at the bottom. So I think that the Sarvaganottara in this old manuscript is reflecting this type that we saw in several Cambodian instances, but also I think I showed you one from Aihole. And if you carry on reading through the text, you'll see that all the other types are similarly, not all the other types, many of the other types are similarly irregular types, which sound like they have real full curves and which sound like they describe things that we find, old types of linga that we find in the archaeological record. Here in Cambodia, in Champa, in South Vietnam, in different places. The lingas have not always looked the way they look here on the left. And so just the one example I can give you here is Mridangam Kamadam Giyam Mridangakara Samsthitam. Remember I said that some of those Cambodian lingas look like mridangas. Okay, so what the point of all of this was to show you that I think that through textual criticism, one can get back to early layers of the past, not just philosophical ideas. So the tiny portion of the Sarvaganottara so far published is the famous part which is devoted to theology. It's the so-called Jnanapada, according to Aghora Shiva's commentary. But there is much, much else besides that in this rather fascinating Sarvaganottara text. And by piecing together the various manuscripts, so this is another, unfortunately, very difficult to use Grantha source in the French Institute in Pondicherry. And the portion that we were reading, you can perhaps see is here. They're very hard. I think this is supposed to be Chaturashram Adhobhagam, Ashtashram, but yes, it's definitely here. And here you can see the Kukutanda Sama. So this is the commentary of Aghora Shiva. Unfortunately, it was copied on paper, which was rather acidic, and therefore you can see both sides of the paper at the same time, and many leaves have been eaten away and fallen apart because of the acidity content of the paper. Anyway, with all of these sources, one can bring together a lost, long lost text, which people have not been able to read, I think, for a few, in its entirety, for a few centuries. So that's the interest of text criticism. It requires thought, and it requires openness of mind, and it requires bearing in mind other things like evidence from archaeology in order, I believe, to edit it correctly. Okay, so I must be approaching the end of my time, but I have a couple more examples, and I thought that this would be an interesting one. This is a passage from the Shiva Dharma. So if you've never heard of the Shiva Dharma, there is no shame. I think for a long while there was no published copy of it. It's a text that perhaps belongs to the 7th century, and it is very, very interesting. because it seems to provide a record of a lot of lay practices of Shaivism. And one of these European projects that our office is engaged in, many researchers in our office here in Pondicherry are working towards different parts of this project. But one of the tasks is to edit as much as possible of the Shiva Dharma, which we believe to be 7th century. And here, in this case, we have not just one old Nepalese palm leaf manuscript, but lots and lots of them. So here's just a sampling. I'm afraid I haven't noticed where they all belong. You can see that this second one has copyright Cambridge University Library. That's because this is one of the old palm leaf manuscripts, which is kept in a very fine collection of Nepalese manuscripts in Cambridge. This one at the bottom is also of very considerable interest. You can see that it looks extremely damaged. It has lettering rather similar to the manuscript of the Nishwasa, the manuscript of the Sarvaganata. I think most people are agreed that this manuscript dates to the 9th century. Let's say not the text, the manuscript itself is as old as the 9th century, which is quite an exciting find. And it transmits the Shiva Dharma. And you can see from the number of old Nepalese manuscripts that this text was pretty important in Nepal. You can also see that if you look in manuscript catalogues elsewhere, you'll find that there are manuscripts from absolutely every part of the Indian subcontinent. So there are lots here in the French Institute Library in Pondicherry, and there are lots also. There is one in Kashmir, there are several in Bengal, there are ones in Telugu script writing areas, Malayalam speaking areas. There is indeed a commentary in Trivandrum, that's to say a single manuscript being edited by Dr. S.S. Sharma, or a single manuscript transmitting a Sanskrit commentary, which is kept in the Trivandrum library. So in other words, this Shiva Dharma, although not famous now, was obviously a very important text. And so my particular task in this project is to edit the 10th chapter, and the 10th chapter is all about jnana, where jnana really means dhyana or yoga. So it's a very interesting, relatively early account of yoga that is totally independent of the Patanjala tradition of yoga. And as you may know, the European Research Council is very keen on having results accessible to everybody. That's to say, making sure that all this research is being paid for out of public European funds. So it's European taxpayers who support all the projects that the European Research Council decides to sponsor. And therefore, they should have access to the results. So in other words, instead of trying to produce just a textbook, a book print edition, what we're trying to do here for these European research projects is to produce also a format which can go directly line. And I've tried to show you that by showing you that this is a snapshot of my screen inside a web browser, Firefox. And you can see, I'm afraid this is not an active screen, but you can see here toggle variants, also toggle translation. The idea is that you'll be able to see the text in Devanagari or in Roman transliteration, and you will be able to click on and off to see if there is a variant or not. So here's one variant which is toggled. You can see it's open here. So here we read Dhyana Yagyaha Parastasmat Apavarga Palapradaha. This is all about the claim that dhyana is a sort of yagyaha, is a sort of sacrifice, but it's himsadi dosha muktatvat vishuddha chitta sadhana. It's a yagyaha, it's a sacrifice, but it's achieved by the mind, chitta sadhana, and it is pure, vishuddha. Why? Because it is himsadi dosha muktatvat, because it is free from all such faults as himsa, as violence to other living creatures. And this dhyana yagyaha is supreme. But you can see here, because the variants are toggled on for 76C, dhyana yagyaha paras. So these manuscripts have this reading, and some other manuscripts have the reading dhyana yoga paraha. So our plan is to produce editions of the Shiva Dharma, which we believe to be a terribly important text for the early history, particularly of non-tantric Shaivism, of non-mantra marga Shaivism. We plan to produce not only a print edition, but also something which goes online straight away and which everybody can consult, and they can then also see the apparatus, see all the variants. All the work should be made accessible everywhere. And while this is a very good thing for European citizens, no doubt, it is also, I believe, a very good thing generally. As you know, I think it was being referred to by Professor Rajendran and maybe others yesterday, one of the difficulties in India sometimes is getting access to expensive research books or journals that are terrifyingly expensive and really meant only to be purchased by libraries. And of course, the situation has improved with archive.org and so forth. But there still are a lot of things which are tricky to obtain. And so this venture of the European Research Council and pushing online research is rather a boon, I believe, if it turns out to work. So with luck, we hope we shall have print editions of many of these things, but exactly the same material will be available online. Okay, so that was the Shiva Dharma, and I think that's the last of the examples I wanted to show you. So the Naimitika Kriyana Sandhana is transmitted in a single manuscript, so this is a very simple case for text criticism. Then the Sarvagyanotara, well, this is a really complicated case with dozens of manuscripts in many, many different scripts, and no one manuscript complete. Every manuscript having different fragments of the whole, so that fitting together the thing is like a big jigsaw puzzle. And an extra complication is that you really need to use the commentary of our Guru Shiva in order to fit all the different bits into the right places. Otherwise, you cannot reconstruct the text. And an enormous number of errors in the transmission. So it's a very, it's an editing project that requires an enormous amount of intervention and is very far from being simply a copying of the text from one or other source. And then finally, the Shiva Dharma case. This is a case really, it illustrates how many riches there are, texts of enormous importance in every domain of Sanskrit learning, which for one reason or the other have not received the attention that they deserve as historical documents, as testimonies of sophisticated philosophical thought, as examples of fine poetry, and so on and so forth. This is just one among many, many, many others. So having given you the examples, I'm going to just go through some give you something which I think might be useful to you if you are thinking about also getting involved in editing. So just to point out that there are now all these resources online, not so many of them, not as many as one would hope, but some libraries have been putting materials online where you don't need to travel and pay costs for photographs and things of certain texts, because you can find them in these relatively small collections that have already gone online. So a pioneer in this respect was the French Institute of Indology, the French Institute of Pondicherry with us, the FEO, the École Française de Témoignage. These manuscripts, paper manuscripts, 1,144 of them went online in 2007 with the help of the Mukta Bodhi Indological Research Institute. And that address may not be the most up-to-date one, but basically it's there somewhere in the Mukta Bodhi Indological Research Institute. Also, you may know I was referring to how, by the way, that actually happens to be a Shiva Dharma manuscript, I think. Yes, you can see here, Shivam cha Shiva Dharma cha Tulyamiva Nasamshaya. So it's a manuscript to the Shiva Dharma corpus. This is another manuscript to the Shiva Dharma corpus in Cambridge. Cambridge have not put all their manuscripts online, but they have put quite a lot of manuscripts online as a sample, with the idea that they would continue to do this later if there were further funds. But already with the ones that are online, you can see they're very, very clear images, and you can read the entire manuscript in all the cases where they have got them online. So that's another precious resource if you're considering editing anything that happens to be in that collection now online. Also not so widely known maybe is that the University of Tokyo has the Institute for Oriental Culture, the University of Tokyo, has put its manuscripts online. As you see, the navigating the thing is all in Japanese. But these days with Google Translate and DeepL and these automatic translation tools, you can navigate, you can find the manuscripts, and the images of the manuscripts are available with a little bit of exploration. This always has to be mentioned. This is extraordinary. This is not a whole lot of manuscripts online, but there is a catalogue online. This through 30 years at the end of the 20th century, the Nepal German Manuscript Preservation Project microfilmed a very large number of manuscripts in Nepal. And then for a while, cataloguing was done by the Nepalese German Manuscript Cataloguing Project. And they maintain this wiki page, as you see, which gives you an online database. I'm not sure that's the absolutely latest address, but you can find that easily online. And there, as you might expect, there are many precious manuscripts in Nepal because the climate of the Kathmandu Valley is very cool and dry and has therefore kept manuscripts, as we saw, from the 9th century, Palmer's manuscripts, up to the present day. So we have 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th century manuscripts, manuscripts from every century up to the present day, in short, and a very large number of them. Yes, and finally on this line, I should mention the new Catalogorium, which the University of Madras and latterly Professor Dash have been maintaining and bringing up to date, and one can consult that to find text. So although, as I'm justifying again this premise that this is an emerging trend, I think that text criticism has been going on forever and actually rather intensively in India in a certain way, because the whole tradition of commentary writing is a way not just of explaining how the text is to be understood, but often it effectively is commenting on how commentators often comment on specific readings, and they are somehow preserving, they are in a way doing one of the tasks that a modern editor would do, that's to say, annotating, explaining, and justifying why there's this reading and not that reading, all of this sort of work, text criticism in other words, in a certain form which was possible given the situation then. Our situation is a new situation where nobody is copying this literature anymore by hand, so it has reached a full stop, but we suddenly, through photography and travel and cataloging and internet and so forth, have unparalleled access, if we want to use it, unparalleled access to vast treasures. And therefore, this should really be an exploding trend, not just emerging, but exploding trend. And more people should be, in fact, looking into manuscript collections and seeing what astonishing and interesting works survive from the past. So just finally, a tiny bit of bibliography. I think a lot of people who start working on text criticism look at manuals which are really intended for editors of classical texts, that's to say, European classics in Greek or Latin. And a lot of those, you see that this book actually starts with something about, is your edition really necessary? So I think that this presumes the situation where there are already half a dozen editions from the 20th century of the particular classical Greek or Latin text you wish to edit. Do you really need to add another one? But as you know very well, for Sanskrit, this is almost never the case. So many editions are necessary. Recently, there's been this volume of the VZKS, this Viennese journal, a whole volume devoted to text genealogy, textual criticism, and editorial technique, as applied really to Indian studies. So that's an interesting thing to look at. When I started off, did much more reading, instead of reading theoretical general works, I think it is very interesting to read the prefaces of particular editions of particular texts, where you see then that all the theory, however much you read, actually doesn't prepare you for the very slightly different situations which each text transmission presents. And therefore, yes, I found it interesting to look at certainly some articles, like this article on conjectural emendation, defending the importance of sometimes amending the text. But I also looked at prefaces of texts, prefaces of editions to often medieval European texts, also Greek and Latin texts, but Dodd's edition of the Bacchae. Anyway, this is simply personal history. I think that what I mean to say by it is that instead of simply reading theoretical accounts of text criticism and how you can and should practice, if you look at the way real historical editors have dealt with real problems, this is often more inspiring, more, it helps you search yourself for problems in a different sort of way. Solutions to them. Okay, I think that this might be absolutely the end. I think these are the three things which are most important when critically editing. I think you have to read widely. Let's say you cannot just read your text. You have to read all around it, all the things that might possibly be of relevance or faintly parallel or whatever, as much as you can. And I think you then need to be ready to see connections. Let's say you find parallels in the way in which certain ideas are presented. But you also need to know when to discriminate. I think that some people have a tendency to take their text and then they see some variant form. So the example that we saw earlier was drishya drishyam, and the old Nepalese manuscript has drishya drishyam. Well, I think many editors would say, we look in the dictionary and we see drishya is the correct form, and so we standardize. We take the modern spelling, which is not just a modern spelling, but it's a different word. And in other words, to flatten out anything that might originally have been different or special about the text. So I think we need to know how to discriminate when, in which circumstances to say, I cannot apply this general rule, or I cannot simply flatten the vocabulary. I have to maintain that here there is something different, something special, something unusual in this line of this text. I think those are the three important things for scholarship: reading widely, seeing connections, but at the same time knowing when to discriminate. And this really is my final slide. I think another thing that I have observed looking at other people's editions in progress is that many people do not observe this first rule, which is to bear in mind the importance of good transcription conventions. And today that really means using Unicode. There are so many people who type things in Word using a mixture of clutter of different Devanagari fonts which do not use the same encoding, and this is disastrous. Finally, and this really is the final point, I think, the manifold benefits of grepping. So what I mean by grepping is, so it's grep is an acronym for Global Search for Regular Expressions and Printing the Lines. But actually what it is sophisticated pattern searching, because now, as we all know, there are an enormous number of texts which have been put into electronic form. In other words, they're electronically readable, so that you can search for an expression like drishya, for example, in a very large corpus of texts. The more you have, the more results you find. And this gives you access to parallels. And this in turn makes you able then to see connections. And also it helps you to know how to discriminate. I think that doing a lot of searching and finding parallel materials is invariably very, very helpful in this business. Okay, I think I have run over time, but thank you very much indeed. I hope that I have encouraged some of you to consider making critical editions.
Thank you, sir. This is the time for discussion. If there is any doubt or something asked to Dr. Dominic Dunn, you can please ask him. Hello. Can you hear me? Hello. Let me have two words regarding Dominic Dunn. Dominic Dunn is currently working as professor in French School of Asian Studies, and from 2000 itself, he is serving as a member of the same studies. and he is the co-editor of Viennese Dictionary of Tantric Terminology, Tantrika Adhidhana Koshaka, and a contributor to Encyclopedia of Manuscript Cultures in Asia and Africa. And also, he is an elected member of foreign correspondent of Academic Inscriptions and Venice Letters. It's a translate, I think I couldn't pronounce properly. And he has published several editions and translations of works of poetry in Sanskrit and unpublished Shiva scriptures, and he is an expert in editing Cambodian epigraphs, which was proved by his words itself. And it's my humble word that it is difficult for a normal person to cross any boundaries, even it is the boundary of 2 hertz or knowledge or even the geographical boundaries. Here we had a person, scholar, who had crossed all those boundaries, geographical boundaries, knowledge boundaries, language boundaries, everything. And now he touched our hearts. It is scholarly words too. He has crossed the boundary of our hearts too now. It was really interesting to see the manuscripts and hear the details related with that. And we are wondered seeing the efforts, how he has worked on all these things. And we are inspired. And thank you so much, sir. And inviting discussions to, if any. Can we wait for 5 minutes, sir?
Yes, carry on.
Any doubts?
Sudesh, unmute ചെയ്തോ എല്ലാരെയും? Sudesh.
Unmute ചെയ്യാം.
Okay.
Hope nobody has any doubts.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good morning and namaste to all. I am Mrs. Sharma from the same institution where my friend and colleague Dominic was talking from my next room. കുറച്ച് മലയാളത്തിലേക്ക് മാറ്റാം ഇനി. അതിൽ നിന്ന് വളരെയധികം സന്തോഷമുണ്ട്. ഡൊമിനിക് കഴിഞ്ഞ ഒരു 2-3 ആഴ്ചയ്ക്ക് മുമ്പ് ട്രിവാൻഡ്രത്തൊരു പ്രസന്റേഷൻ ഉണ്ട്, ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു പരിപാടിയെ കുറിച്ച് പറഞ്ഞു. പക്ഷെ അത് സാൻസ്ക്രിറ്റ് കോളേജ് ആണെന്നുള്ളത് ഇന്നലെയാണ് അറിഞ്ഞത്. അപ്പോൾ അത് വളരെയധികം സന്തോഷമുണ്ട്. ഡൊമിനിക്, I have studied in the institution, the Trivandrum Sanskrit College, till my MA. So on behalf of the alumni of Trivandrum Sanskrit College, I should thank you very much for taking this time and giving a very excellent presentation. I think this must be very much encouraging for all my young researchers and students. അപ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് ഇത് ഡൊമിനിക് പറഞ്ഞ കാര്യങ്ങൾ 2-3 കാര്യം പ്രസക്തമായിട്ട് മനസ്സിലാക്കേണ്ട. ഈ തരത്തിലൊരു റിസർച്ച് ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് നമുക്ക്, അതാണല്ലോ ഇന്നലെ രാജേന്ദ്രൻ മാഷൊക്കെ എംഫസൈസ് ചെയ്തത്, നമുക്ക് വെറും ഒരു സാൻസ്ക്രിറ്റ് നോളജ് അല്ല. നമുക്കപ്പോൾ ഡൊമിനിക്കിന്റെ പ്രസന്റേഷനിൽ കൂടി കാണിക്കാൻ ശ്രമിച്ച എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ, ടെക്സ്റ്റ് എഡിറ്റ് ചെയ്യണം എന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ പ്യൂർലി ലാംഗ്വേജ് നോളജ് മാത്രമല്ല, കുറച്ച് ഐക്കണോഗ്രാഫിക്കൽ, നമ്മൾ ഇൻസ്ക്രിപ്ഷൻ ഒന്നും സാൻസ്ക്രിറ്റ് സ്റ്റുഡൻസ് യൂഷ്വലി നോക്കാറില്ല. പക്ഷെ നമുക്ക് നല്ലൊരു റിസർച്ചിന് നമുക്ക് ഇൻസ്ക്രിപ്ഷൻ നോക്കണം, കുറച്ച് ഹിസ്റ്ററി വേണം, ഐക്കണോഗ്രാഫി വേണം. അപ്പൊ ഇത്രയൊക്കെ ബാക്ക്ഗ്രൗണ്ട് ഉള്ളപ്പോഴാണ് നമുക്കൊരു ടെക്സ്റ്റ് എഡിറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ കഴിയുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ നമ്മുടെ പ്രത്യേകിച്ചും കേരളത്തിലെ ഡൊമിനിക് മാൻസ്ക്രിപ്റ്റിനെ കുറിച്ച് സംസാരിച്ചത് കൊണ്ട്, കേരളത്തിൽ നമ്മൾ വളരെ റിച്ച് ആണ് ഈ മാൻസ്ക്രിപ്റ്റ് ട്രഷർ. ഇപ്പൊ ഡൊമിനിക് ഇന്ന് സംസാരിച്ച ശിവധർമ്മ, ഈ ശിവധർമ്മവും ശിവധർമ്മോത്തരവും ശിവധർമ്മ കോർപ്പസിന്റെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട 2 ടെക്സ്റ്റുകൾക്ക് നമുക്ക് ആ കൂടി കിട്ടുന്ന ഒരു വ്യാഖ്യാനം ട്രിവാൻഡ്രത്ത് മാത്രമാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ട്രിവാൻഡ്രം കളക്ഷനും കേരളത്തിലുള്ള മാൻസ്ക്രിപ്റ്റും എത്രമാത്രം പ്രാധാന്യം അർഹിക്കുന്നു എന്നുള്ളത് നമുക്ക് വ്യക്തമായിട്ട് മനസ്സിലാക്കാം. അപ്പോൾ ഇന്ന് ഇത് കേട്ടുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരുപാട് യങ്സ്റ്റേഴ്സിന് ഇത് നല്ലൊരു പ്രചോദനമാകണം. അപ്പോൾ കുറേയധികം കുട്ടികൾ മാൻസ്ക്രിപ്റ്റോളജിയും മാൻസ്ക്രിപ്റ്റ്സ് പഠിക്കാനും ഒക്കെ താല്പര്യം എടുത്ത് നമുക്ക് ഒട്ടനവധി അൺപബ്ലിഷ്ഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള മെറ്റീരിയൽസ് നമുക്ക് പബ്ലിഷ് ചെയ്ത് കൊണ്ടുവരാൻ കഴിയണം. അപ്പോൾ അതിന് ഡൊമിനിക് ഇന്ന് നമുക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും നല്ലൊരു പ്രചോദനം നൽകി. Thank you very much, Dominic, for this excellent presentation. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sharma sir. ഞങ്ങൾ വളരെ അഭിമാനത്തിലാണ് ഞങ്ങളുടെ കൂട്ടത്തിൽ നിന്നും ഇവിടെ പഠിച്ച ഒരാൾ അവിടെ ഉണ്ടല്ലോ എന്നുള്ളത്.
Sir, may I? Hello.
Hello, namaste, namaste.
Yes, please.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I am Tejas Nambudiri, a guest lecturer in Sanskrit and also a research scholar. First of all, a big thanks to Dominic sir for presenting such a majestic paper in the field of Tantra in front of the august audience who are present virtually here. Sir, I would like to get some clarifications from you. That is, are you able to find historically or to trace historically from the scriptures at what time period the discriminations have been taken place in Shaivism? That is, in the form of Mrityunjaya, Rudra, Sadashiva, Vamadeva, Tumburu, etc. and etc., Bhairava, etc. Are you able to find from the scriptures at what time period historically this have been occurred? Because the form of Shaivism or the origin of Shaivism can be traced back to even BC, that is in the form of Pashupati, etc., which have been screened in the Harappan, which can be seen in the Harappan inscriptions. So I would like to get a clarification that is at what time period the discriminations have been made in the Shaivism, that is like the Sadashiva, Mrityunjaya, etc. I think I have made the question clear.
Yes, thank you. It's an interesting question. Of course, it's not so easy to determine each case of each divinity when they first appear, partly because we don't really know the contours of what survives. We do not know what the early, until we edit things and gradually make more and more available, then we're not sure how old the texts are that we have surviving are. I mean, it's rather clear that, for instance, for Tumburu, we have some Shiva scriptures which refer to Tumburu and speak of Tumburu, but they may not be the oldest sources. I mean, we may have lost much material. So strangely, some of the earliest references to Tumburu are not in Shiva scriptures at all. Another important survival in Trivandrum, as you may know, is a work of Buddhist Tantra called the Manjushriya Mula Tantra. Manjushriya
Mula Kalpa.
That's it. Thank you, Sharma. Manjushriya Mula Kalpa. And that manuscript in Trivandrum is Buddhist Tantra. People call it a Kriya Tantra, meaning that it's one of the earlier forms of Buddhist Tantra. And inside there, we have information about Tumburu, his mantras, his four sisters, and so forth. And it's possible that situation there in Manjushriya Mula Kalpa is one of the earliest surviving references to Tumburu, which means that other Shiva material, I mean, clearly he's a Shiva deity, he is a Shiva, but it may be that we don't yet know because there's so much still to be discovered in what survives. But we don't know whether we have other older material from within the Shiva corpus which speaks about him. As for Sadashiva, well, your question is a very interesting one. I mean, it's problematic because we know that Sadashiva features in one of the Brahma mantras, Sadashivom. But the problem with the term can often be separated to Sadashiva. And so what do you mean when you say what is the earliest occurrence of Sadashiva? I mean, the expression may be Vedic, but if you mean the iconographical form where Shiva has 5 heads, 10 arms, and certain attributes in those arms and so forth, that's a much more tricky question. It seems that, of course, you could accept in the Nishwasa Tattva Samhita, in the place where we expect a visualization of Sadashiva to be given, We don't really have that. We have another face on the front, not Tatpurusha. So I think that it seems to me that some deities are evolving, and for some others, we don't know whether we have the oldest surviving literature, and so forth. And so to answer the kind of question you want to answer, like, can we establish exactly at which point in time these different divinities came into existence? That's a very tricky question. I mean, I think that when you look at even the name of a religious tradition, like the name Shiva Siddhanta, we can pinpoint the two earliest occurrences that we can now find, but we don't really know when that label came to be applied. I mean, so in Kanchipuram, in the Kailasanatha temple, on the western end, the king is described as Kshata Sakala Malach Shaiva Siddhanta Margi. And this is clearly a reference to the Shiva Siddhanta. But two problems with that. One is this really the earliest reference? We can't find another early one, but may have been referred to this way much earlier, centuries earlier. And the other problem is, does it really mean the same thing? I mean, is the Shiva Siddhanta the same entity in 7th century Kanchipuram as it is in 12th century Madurai? It keeps changing. And I think you have the similar problem with some of the deities. Tumburu, earliest evidence is that he is four-headed, and then, but we have descriptions of him also as five-headed. So is it the, yes, defining terms is complicated. I think that another answer to your question is, I'm sure that we find enormous quantities of information about the dating, relative to the dating of different religious traditions in the Agamas, but the thing is, so much of it has not been edited. There's so much still floating around in manuscripts, and we cannot really say what there is and what there is not.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we move on to the next session? Any more doubts?
Thank you very much indeed.
Rajesh sir? Hello.
Yeah, okay.
धन्यवादाः वयम् इदानीं पंडितरत्नं डॉक्टर जी गंगाधरन् वर्याः अस्माभिः सह वर्तन्ते। एते च महान्तः कालडी श्रीशंकराचार्य संस्कृत विश्वविद्यालये व्याकरणविभागाध्यक्षाः सत्तायप्रमुखाश्च आसन्। सुकृतीन्द्र ओरिएंटल रिसर्च इंस्टिट्यूट इति वयं जानीमः। तस्याः संस्थायाः शैक्षणिकसमितेः शोधपत्रिकायाः सम्पादकीय समितेश्च अध्यक्षाः सन्ति। संस्कृतप्रचारणे निमग्नाः एते महान्तः तदर्थं राष्ट्रपतिपुरस्कारेण सम्मानितश्च वर्तन्ते। गुरुभूतानाम् एतेषां नन्तु अस्मान् वाग्वैखरी प्रवचनेन एतेषां विषयो वर्तते paradigm shifts in Sanskrit and ecological research.
हरि ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। Respected Professor Vimala, the principal, Dr. Goodall, Dr. Rajesh, Dr. Unikrishnan, Srimati Gayatri, I am very glad to be with you, and we are discussing about the paradigm shift. Not only one paradigm shift, the paradigm shifts in Sanskrit and Indological research. Why I took this subject? Because nowadays we are thinking of a great paradigm shift in our research, not only in Sanskrit, not only in neurology, but in all fields. The new education policy, the national education policy presented by the government of India and which is being discussed by all of us recently, envisages changes, thorough changes in our thinking pattern. That is why we are thinking of paradigm shifts, some fundamental changes in approach and underlying assumptions are intended. And not only discussing that, but from the very beginning, what were the shifts, these paradigm shifts, where the importance was changed, importance of research was changed with some other thing that is being discussed. And you all know that studies in Indology started in the West, not here in India, but it started in the West. But that is because when foreigners started to come to India in large numbers, they came here for trade and they entered as our masters. That is another thing. But along with that, they came here, they realized India had riches not only in material wealth, but also in, intellectual property. We had intellectual property. That was because of our ancient sages who preserved our knowledge system. And that tradition persisted here. Even when the Europeans came here, they captured power and they were ruling. Even then, the tradition survived here. So they wanted to study whatever knowledge they could get from India. And they understood that a large part of the knowledge was in Sanskrit, in Prakrit, and the native language also, the knowledge was there, but the most part of the knowledge in India existed in Sanskrit, and there were very great scholars. Moreover, there were manuscripts kept, and Sanskrit preserved our knowledge system, and many texts were spiritual, and there were scientific texts also. They understood. And in the 17th and late 17th and early 18th centuries, they started studying, and they studied Sanskrit. When they studied Sanskrit, they felt that the Sanskrit had something in common with their language because many words were common. The reason they said that Sanskrit was the elder sister of their common parents, Greek and Latin. On that, if I not to speak very much long, but when Sir William Jones came to India, he understood, he thought that Bengali language was very similar to Sanskrit. Even some people, some Westerners thought that Bengali was actually Sanskrit. That was there. Then these people, just like William Jones, studied Sanskrit. They understood that Sanskrit had literary riches in it. Are you not hearing me? Hariom? Hariom? Hariom, is there any problem with the internet? Rajesh Kumar? Rajesh Kumar, are you hearing me? Gayatri, are you hearing me?
Yes, sir.
Pradeep Verma, are you hearing me? Is there
I
any
can hear you,
problem?
sir. I can hear you, sir, perfectly.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, thank you. I thought because some signal came here. I thought you are not hearing me. That is right. Then they studied the language, and the Chinese had some idea, and the British people started studying. Then Indology got a flip. Indological studies got a flip when the British studied Sanskrit. And one idea they had, they understood that Sanskrit should be studied. Not only Sanskrit, they wanted to study the regional languages also. And to study the regional languages, they wanted to formulate grammar for their studies. That is why several foreigners were the pioneers in creating grammar of different languages of India. It does not mean that we had no language studies. We had very good language studies from ancient times, because Panini had shown the way, and we were following that way. And in every region language, some method was there, some method of teaching, and we had taught our language. But the Western people in those days, they did not really realize the tradition of Sanskrit learning, because their language was in a fluctuating state always. Even the vowel system was fluctuating. Even now, because of the lack of a phonetic script, their phonetic system is changing. Some of the words now we pronounce in a different way than they were pronounced when I was young. Some English words even. That is there. Not only that the vowels change, even in the consonants also there are changes happening again and again. But we have an alphabetic system even during the Vedic period, and it was a classified system. And in the classified system, even though it was not written in the present script, we do not know whether there was a script at the time of the early Vedic period, but there should have been a script. And even before a script, we had arranged all our phonemes in a systematic way, starting with the first point of articulation from our throat onwards, and up to the lips. That was there. But in the West, it was not the case. Even then, they want to study, and they thought that Sanskrit is connected with their language. So they wanted to create a vocabulary, and so they premeditated on an Indo-European language, Proto-Indo-European language. Then they started. But by the time the Britishers were gaining ground in India, they realized that the Indian system of education was not helpful for them. Because of the Sanskrit education system, the people were strongly in their religious beliefs, and they were not being converted. And as a result, one Borden, who was a lieutenant colonel, he approached the Oxford University, and he bequeathed all his possessions for the establishment of a post of professor, Borden professor, and it was intended actually for converting Indians into Christianity. That was the intention. Monier Williams who was appointed, not appointed, but elected to that post, Monier Williams, he regarded the study of Sanskrit as a means to and an end, namely the conversion of India to Christianity. That was his aim, and he wanted to keep that tradition. That way, the Oxford professorship should be kept. And there was the scholar Max Muller who had studied Rigveda and edited, and he was engaged in edition. But Monier Williams was engaged in teaching Sanskrit to those British people who had to serve in India. He was teaching Sanskrit. And Max Muller was editing. He was editing Rigveda. And Max Muller had his own views, but Monier Williams had strong views that all types of Indian knowledge should be studied and taught with the intention of propagating Christianity. That was his intention. And the professor post was elected one. And even in the papers, there was a discussion. And in the election, Max Muller failed, and Monier Williams was appointed professor. Yeah, but what happened? He stopped, or Max Muller stopped teaching Sanskrit. Then he engaged himself in translating and editing. Of course, we have a lot of books, the sacred books of the East and the like, because Max Muller did not engage himself in teaching. If he was engaged in teaching only, what would have happened? His time would have been wasted in teaching. I don't say wasted in teaching because he was teaching Sanskrit. He could teach Sanskrit. But to whom? To people to serve India. But he did not do that because Monier Williams was elected. This Max Muller remained as an editor and a student of our Eastern books. So that was a blessing for all the people, all the scholars all over the world. That is one thing. Then, actually, some people have been saying that Indians had no sense of history, had no sense of science, and they did not know the scientific method. Think of the period when the Vedas were edited by Vyasa. And then when the Vedas are classified into 4, think of the time. Then anywhere in the world, could you think of a system where all the rishis who first said the mantras, we say they have seen, the rishis have seen, we say, and from there Vyasa got the mantras. Vyasa wrote that, and Vyasa, when he classified the mantras, he put the names of the devatas to whom the hymns are attributed, and also the and all this he did for what? Serving the Vedic tradition, reality. And in course of time, even now know from where that mantra came. And even now we pronounce the mantras in the very same way as the ancient rishis did. And we do not add any syllable. We do not take away any syllables because of formulating, because of such carefulness to explain, not explain, to show his just now the connection was lost. The connection was lost, and I do not know you are hearing or not, but I think you are listening to, and I can speak. Okay.
We can
Then
hear, sir.
Vyasa did like that, and also think of Yaska. Before Yaska, even Vedic mantras were not in the spoken language. There was the spoken language. Some words went out of usage. And some new usages came into the spoken language. Then the people who lived at the time of Yaska could not understand some of the I'll stop the video and speak. Sometimes it may be good. Okay. Then he had a collection of Vedic words. A collection of Vedic words, sometimes of doubted meaning. Some words were used in several meanings, even though the meanings, many of the meanings were known to the common man, but they were used in a different sense in the Vedas. So what did he do? He himself found out a methodology to find out the meaning by etymology. We do not say that all the etymologies given by Yaska are correct, but he has given a methodology and he has explained all the words to suit the situation and to give a meaning. Whether that meaning was correct or not, even now we have to think. In many cases, we have to think. That is another thing. But he had given a method that was there. So it was not new to the Indians. The edition was not new to the Indians. When Panini did Ashtatyayi, when he taught Ashtatyayi, the first grammar book ever available in the world, then he had an artificial method, so to say, but that was a foolproof method. But even there, he had a research mentality. What was that? When there were variations in usages, he immediately showed a person from whom he got that knowledge. A grammarian who put forth a theory, a sutra for that he did. This is research methodology. Our research methodology has been promulgated recently. Here, where you are showing the author, where you are showing the text from which it was taken, and also the time, that means the year in which that idea was given in a book or not. That is here. But in the ancient times, it was good to have the person, the name of that person who said something in our Shastras. That was there. So that was there, and for the language also, they were thinking of the language, and the researchers, the Western researchers were thinking of a language which was akin to their language. That was there. And during the time of Caldwell, a theory was postulated, the Dravidian theory. But we had no such divisions as such. And nobody in the ancient period said the Aryan language as such. There was a certain province where the people were called Aryans. Not Aryans as such. The word Aryan also comes from South India. If it was taken from Sanskrit, it would be Arya only. But here, because Caldwell and others had some vested interest, say some hidden, not hidden agenda as such, some other agenda. Actually, Monier Williams had no hidden agenda. He openly said, but other people had some hidden agenda like that. So the division was made between the Aryan and the Dravidian. But the people who are taught that the North Indians are white and you are also dark in skin, they did not understand that all the gods of the so-called Aryans were black. Krishna, Rama, all were black. That they did not understand. Also, when the Indo-European language family was promulgated, different from the Dravidian family, they did not understand that the sentence pattern of India is different from the sentence pattern of the Europe. Whether it is Tamil or Malayalam or Sanskrit or Hindi, all these had a common sentence pattern. And even in the Tamil language, there are several Sanskrit words. Either Tatsama or Tadbhava, or which came through the Prakrits. Such words are there. Even then, people connected Sanskrit with the European languages, French, German, and English. And they so that the family is one and the same, but never the people of India, the South India, thought that their language also had similar ideas in Sanskrit and Tamil, and the pattern is the same. The Western languages had no such pattern. It was different, entirely different. Our researchers did not think that. But where did the paradigm shift to come? Somebody suggested, some of our ancient thinkers, not ancient, very ancient, but our thinkers like Aravinda Ghosh, he thought that Tamil had a common parent with Sanskrit. He thought that. And he wrote a book, and it was not complete as such, the origin of the Aryan speech. And there he was thinking of a common parent that was there for Sanskrit and Tamil. It is probable that in the Vedic period itself, there was a division slowly changing because of the decay of phonemes, you can say, phonetic decay. Phonetic decay is a phenomenon in the world. It is a common phenomenon everywhere. Even now you see that even those people who speak Sanskrit words in North and South India, sometimes they pronounce with say how the word can be very easily pronounced with mild phonemes. When somebody says ta, somebody says da. In Sandhi, you see that. And such formations, and also dropping of sounds, elision of sounds, all this happen. And phonetic decay is said to be the reason for the formation of new languages. Max Muller has said that. two reasons he says for the origin of new languages. One, phonetic decay, another is dialectic regeneration. So when a language speaking people migrate from one place to another place, then what happens? In the new place, there may be new situations where they have to use new words, and the new words come into existence. That is regeneration of the reason for regeneration of new language form, that is dialect regeneration. And the phonetic decay, sometimes the inability of the speaker. But in India, from the very ancient times, our gurus were teaching how to pronounce every sound. When one was young, when one was 4 or 5 years old, he was being taught how to pronounce correctly the words, correctly the sounds. That was there. But when this habit disappeared, these phonetic decays appeared. Somebody says that French is the most decayed language phonetically in Europe. German has more sound, more original sounds, whereas English changed several sounds, and the French phonetically changed too much, some say. It is all to be taught by the speakers of these languages. That is there. So here there was, he proposed this paradigm shift, our Aravind Ghosh. He encouraged people to think in a different way. How can you understand that his ideas were influencing others in India? In Kerala, Chattamiswamy, he wrote a book, Adibhasha, the first language. And here he says Tamil, not the Tamil of the present day, but a kind of Tamil, old Tamil, was the parent language of Sanskrit also. His ideas, such ideas were there. But the North Indian people who were actually say proud to say we are Aryans, like somebody from when the Aryan theory was brought forward, and the theory was there. When Hitler was promoting that idea, all were happy, especially the North Indians were happy to say that we are Aryans. Even our nationalists were carried away by the idea. That was Balagangadhar Tilak was a staunch nationalist, but even then, he was also speaking of Aryans. And also he thought that the Aryans came from outside. When the Western linguists said the Aryans came to India, immigrated to India from the sides of Caspian Sea or the middle part of Middle East, then he was thinking that the Aryans came from the North Poles. Nobody thought that when the other parts of the world had no developed language, India had a very developed language. And India had a system of teaching. India had several universities, not in the modern sense, but in such a sense there were universities. Nobody thought of that. Then why should one think that man originated in Africa? Because fossils are not found in India. But there was a, say, a displacement of disc or something like that, plate say displacement, which made the Himalaya mountain appear that way. If something like that happened several our monuments were lost under the earth, and totally because it was a very, very great landslip. Maybe nobody thought of like that. But we have to think of that also. We have already thought, many people, Varad Pandey and all other people thought of the theory, the Aryan theory, Aryan invasion theory, and they proved that there was no invasion theory, there were no massacres of the people of Indus Valley. It was only a natural phenomena of some slip or say landslip or something like that. They have proved now. Even then, our people, most of the people who were educated in the traditional way I mean that in a way which was taught by the Western tradition, they were reluctant to approve this theory. Reluctant to approve, that was there. So the paradigm shift, even though the paradigm shift was there in India, whenever somebody said something in favor of that, most of the official scholars, where the political theories were running riot, they were opposing. They were opposing and they were giving a seal to the person. But that is changing. That is changing. We are finding a change here in our thinking pattern. So it is a paradigm shift we are having, and we should think of it. Then in course of time, say in the beginning they were only studying our text, Sanskrit text. The intention was to find out the faults in our text and expose those faults to the Indian people who were strongly believing in Indian scriptures. So they wanted to study. For that purpose, they translated, and our earliest researchers were in translating our text and also editing them, because there were several changes say, noted by different readings, and so there was the necessity of having a correct edition. Even though the purpose was there, the purpose was to subjugate the Indians. Subjugate to Indians, say what way? Intellectually. But some of the Western scholars thought very well. Even though the thought process in Germany was just like the thought process of Hitler, even before Hitler. There was a thought, but even then, very good German scholars came. Very good German scholars. That is why even now our people say that Sanskrit is living in Germany. Even now I have heard some people say that if you have to study Sanskrit, then you have to go to Germany. There were several scholars, and we had several scholars who went to Germany to do research. We had our E.R. Sharma who went to Germany to study, and when he was there, he is no more now. When he went to Germany and when he was there, he was doing his work. Then only the first broadcast of Sanskrit news started there. Not in India. Radio broadcast of Sanskrit news started in Germany. That is also there. So in that issue, they are the pioneers. And the Germans were the pioneers in teaching the world. There are treasures in Sanskrit. Treasures in Sanskrit. We cannot forget many of them. How many German scholars were there? Even now, some of the scholars are there. I don't say they are all in Germany, but of German descent, there are people that is there. And these people, all those people taught, even then all these people were thinking about the translation and the edition and also tracing the time period. Much studies were not carried out to understand the contents, the real contents of the text. And that is why they were not too much in learning the scientific texts, scientific manuscripts of India. In ancient times, India was ahead of all other foreign countries in the case of science and technology. Say up to 16th century AD, Indians were ahead. Even in the field of mathematics, even in Kerala, there has been much development. And when somebody was thinking of the scientific content of manuscripts, it was rare, but even then it was not much appreciated, because all these people thought that India had not much scientific development. India was ahead of other people in spirituality, but they were not good in science. There was such a thought. Even such thinking persisted among the Indians. Even Indians were also thinking like that. Even though traditionally there were people who were studying mathematics in India, and mathematics was a part of different disciplines. Different disciplines, I mean astrology. This was not for astrology only, not for the sake of astrology only. They were studying mathematics for the sake of astronomy. They were studying mathematics for astrology also, and also they were calculating the periods. They were calculating the atmospheric changes. What for? For agriculture, for farming. They should find the time suited for farming. They were doing like that, how the seasons came, at what time. And for that matter, they studied the movements of the planets. Even though you can say that astrology is not so good, but you cannot say that Indian astronomy was bad, because Indian astronomers, Aryabhata, Bhaskara, Varahamihira, all of them were ahead of the Western thinkers. So these should be studied. But even then, our people were very hesitating to take a foreign shift there. Even some of them did. They made much changes in the thinking process and also in the science. When Aryabhata said something, it was not understood by many, the common people. So somebody thought that Aryabhata was saying something, some nonsense, because they could not very much relish that the people lived below us. When the earth is a globe, even in the Vedic period, our earth was globe, gola. Even then, our people hesitate to accept that. But even then, say even after some 6,000 years and 600 years, even after 600 years, Aryabhata was not properly understood by many. But Brahmagupta, similarly, our other astronomers here understood. They explained very well. Even in Kerala, there was like Parameshwara of the 15th century or 16th century, who explained all these things in a clear way and put forth new theories. Sangamagram Madhava, from whom Parameshwara studied astronomy and mathematics. All these people were thinking. That was a very good paradigm shift in our thinking process, a scientific thought. But such scientific thinking and researches on those lines were not taken up by many people. Even some people attempted, that is there, but so I even now I remember in 1983 I made a public lecture in Trivandrum, and that lecture was publicized in newspapers of Ernakulam edition, and I showed what were the ancient scientific developments in India. The very same paper was published in the Pragati quarterly of 1983 September. But even then, even my colleagues were not accepting what I was saying. Some were against because it was not suited for their political thinking. Some were not accepting because they did not want to study such difficult things. They said all these are difficult to study. Why should we study such materials when we can do with our literature and also our Vedanta spiritual studies? Why should we bother about the scientific studies? Even grammar is very difficult, they said. When grammar is very difficult, why should you go after science? Why should you go after chemistry or physics or mathematics in Sanskrit? That was their view. But the present scenario is changing. Here we have several people coming out for scientific research also. Even the Sanskrit students who are taking up research in Sanskrit, they also, even though they do not have much knowledge, scientific knowledge, their learning in science is very poor. Even then, they are trying to take such subjects, topics for research. But I should say, if you have to take up a scientific subject, what should you do? You should have knowledge in that. You should have knowledge in science also. If you are not having knowledge in chemistry, then how can you take up a chemical action described in a text in Sanskrit? And also, if you are thinking of Brahman as a separate kind of energy and Maya as something which is ignorance, then if you have to explain it in the modern technology, modern scientific method, then you should know the quantum mechanics. You should know quantum mechanics. You should know the field, magnetic field theory. All these things you have to know. But if you do not have such knowledge, better you did not try. Some people are taking subject research. I know that our students are very much worried about a research topic. When they are to have a research topic, their main idea is that they should get a degree. Our educations have done a disservice to our education, how they connected teaching with the research as a qualification. If you have PhD degree, you are getting a job, you are getting promotion. So what happens? When UGC stipulated that there should be PhD to teach in colleges and universities, the very fundamental theory behind research has gone. So everyone after masters wanted to have research and get a research degree. Somehow or other, he or she should get a research degree. how can it be achieved? Any method. As a result, what happens? Many research projects have been duplicated. Some thesis, for example, I say, one of my students, he took a subject for research, and it was a grammatical study of a particular Kavya. After some years, again a thesis came to me of the same topic. It was not in Kerala, but it came from a state outside Kerala. Then again, after some years, the very same topic was taken from a candidate in Kerala. Now we say that a topic should not be again repeated. Research should not be repeated in a topic. But think, if new lights are thrown, if there are variations, much variations, then there should be second research. But these are not like that. These are only for the sake of a degree. In the ancient times, our guides were telling us, do not be in a hurry to submit thesis. Learn thoroughly. What is intended is you should have thorough knowledge of the related text, and you should have deep knowledge in your subject. Are you having deep knowledge in your subjects when you take up research? Is it there now? That is the problem. Then research should come if you have that attitude. Attitudinal change is required, and there are some who have attitudes to have scientific research in Sanskrit, but most of them are not Sanskrit scholars, not Sanskrit students, engineering students, science students, those who are medical graduates. They are there. And earlier, many scientists evinced interest in Sanskrit, in research, Sanskrit research. That means researchers in Sanskrit texts, even of Nagarjuna's that book on Rasa, that chemical theories of Rasarnava of Nagarjuna, and such other texts, they were doing research. But think of a Sanskrit scholar going for a research on Rasarnava. Is it very possible? And also, there are mathematical texts even now required. Without a thorough knowledge of mathematical methods, can you go for research? You are having thorough knowledge in Sanskrit, granted. Even then, can you do research? Language for kavyas, sahitya is different. Kavya language for Vedanta is different. You can easily learn the terminology there, but if you are learning mathematics, you should have a different type of knowledge where you are learning new terminology. You should be proficient in such theories, such terminological variations, meaning variations in different shastras. You should know very well. Otherwise you can do research there. Now, I have seen scientists in Indian Institute of Science working on Sanskrit texts. I have seen in the 80s people working on scientific texts. Very good. but they should also get knowledge in Sanskrit. And several professors and several students of those institutions, scholars in those institutions, studied Sanskrit for this purpose. And we are very happy to have some of them even now doing research, even now explaining. Even in Trivandrum, there is a science professor who is very much conversant with mathematical book, mathematical text in Sanskrit. Professor S. Madhavan is there. Recently, I have heard his lecture in a webinar organized by National Sanskrit University of Tirupati. Again, I have heard another scholar from say IIT Kharagpur. He was also having deep knowledge in Sanskrit terminology of mathematics. He was V. Kannan, Professor V. Kannan. Such people are there. So what should we do? Our education policy, national education policy, newly put forth, gives space for studying different subjects. The present pattern is not necessary to be depended on. When you are studying engineering or mathematics or medicine, along with that, you can study Sanskrit also if you like. Not only Sanskrit, any subject whichever you like. If you want to study music along with that, you can do that. I have seen several mathematicians who sing very well, experts in musicology as well as music, both. I have seen such people. But if have to academically study such things, our educational system should have provision for that. That also we will be getting in the new educational policy. That is why yesterday Varkhedi said our Sanskrit colleges will not be the very same now. And he meant that it will not be a watertight compartment where only Sanskrit is taught. In a Sanskrit college, there may be a department of mathematics. There may be a department of chemistry. There may be a department of physics. Maybe possible area. But sometimes I think then that institution, that university or college will be different, and it will be just like the Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit. But okay, that is good. But if you are having Sanskrit also in a Sanskrit university or a Sanskrit college, there should be Sanskrit students and they should study Sanskrit Shastras also. So along with the Sanskrit Shastras, you should study. I was championing the cause of teaching science and technology in Sanskrit for a long time in Sanskrit in universities. But I said, these subjects should be taught in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is a very capable language to deal with any scientific idea. So why don't you teach modern science also in Sanskrit? Then somebody, very say, powerful person in the education sector, he said, it is impossible. You cannot teach scientific texts in Sanskrit. Why? He said, we do not have such textbooks. You have to translate all the textbooks into Sanskrit, all the science textbooks into Sanskrit. Then only you can start teaching science in Sanskrit. If you have to teach engineering in Sanskrit, the engineering textbook should be translated into Sanskrit. Is it possible? Then they said, by the time you translate all these texts, the science would have changed much. Everything you have done is obsolete, out of date. How can you teach? It was the question then. When I was teaching my students in the US, some of the students, Sanskrit students, they were very highly positioned engineers, even CEOs of companies. They were attending my classes, Sanskrit classes. And they told me, when I told them this, they said, why not teach science in Sanskrit? You teach us Sanskrit and you have taught us also Sanskrit. If we are given a choice, we can teach because we know we know our discipline, we know science, and we can teach science in Sanskrit. How did the Chinese teach science in Chinese language? How do the Germans teach science in German language? How do the French people teach in French? They are very, very strong people. French people are very strong. They love their language. Even when you are stranded in an airport in Paris, you go for the help of somebody and speak English. You know only English, but they don't speak to you in English. You speak English, they don't speak. And once I felt that, to whom I asked, he knew English, but he was hesitant to speak English. At the end, because he saw my frustrations, he spoke English. So such people are there. French people are very strong to have their own mother tongue. Sometimes I thought these people are hating English. Why? That should not happen also, that I thought. So I mean only that they give importance to their language. So why don't teach science in Sanskrit? Why don't you teach engineering in Sanskrit? If you know the discipline and if you know the language, don't wait for the text to be translated. They told me, if we are given an opportunity, we shall come and teach. So it is a changing scenario. And now what happens in the new education policy, national education policy, you have a provision to learn whichever discipline you want, whichever subject you want. If you are a student of science, you need not hesitate to study Sanskrit language. You can have a degree in Sanskrit also. So then teaching mother tongue. Somebody told me, how can you teach medicine in mother tongue? If in our medical colleges can teach medicine in Sanskrit, not only in Sanskrit, but in Malayalam, they asked me. Then I said, why not? Then they said, where are the textbooks? Then I told them what my American students told me. That professors are there, they are Malayalis, they know Malayalam. Why do not they teach medicine in Malayalam? Then they said, there are technical words. Then I said, Malayalam is a language we can accept any word from any other language. You can have learn words if necessary. If you are not having proper words in your language, you can have loans from other languages, no problem. It is there. But be careful. You can take words from other languages, and Malayalam has no problem to get any word. Sanskrit has a problem. What is that problem? Those foreign words may not, if you are taking a foreign word, that foreign word may not fit into your language pattern. That may be there. Then there also new methods are there. How can you fit such words? But in the case of Sanskrit, they say if you have to preserve Sanskrit language, then you should have that language Sanskritized word. That word should be, that word should be Sanskritized. Varahamihira showed us the way. Varahamihira took, even though in Sanskrit there were words, enough words for something, sometimes he took a word from Greek and made it Sanskrit. For example, crayon he took from Greek and he said Kriyaha. Taurus he took and he said Tauruhu. Jutuman he took and he said Jutumaha. So he showed the way. But in Malayalam, you do not have this problem also. But in Malayalam, the common man is taking everything from English. Even where you are having very good words in Malayalam, when they speak, their language is full of English. That is how Malayalam is dying. Several languages in India are dying. Not only India, world over. How because of the because of the loan words, I should say, because of the words that are taken from the language, especially from English. Even in Tamil Nadu, there was a strong feeling that Tamil words should be used for all the foreign words. Now they are also changing. Okay, that is something else. But I am saying that there will be another paradigm shift. Earlier, the paradigm shift was there in Sanskrit research, that Sanskrit was studied to understand the scriptures of India for the sake of using the ideas there and finding fault with them to convert people. Then it changed. They wanted to study exactly what is there. There are very good scholars. There are very good scholars there. Whenever we are praising someone, we can praise, no problem. Monier Williams was a very good scholar also, but he gave us a very good dictionary. If you want to know the meaning of a Sanskrit word, immediately you can get from Monier Williams dictionary. Just it is on your fingertip now. But how Monier Williams was successful in creating such a dictionary, we are forgetting our Indian scholars who worked behind the dictionary. Whenever you are praising Mike Muller, we are forgetting those people who are worked with Mike Muller to explain all these things to Mike Muller. They were very good scholars. Never forget that. Even when our Ganapati Shastri was editing books, he was a very good scholar. No doubt, Monier Williams was a very good scholar. No doubt, Mike Muller was a very good scholar. No doubt. But even then, you should see such people. They're very, very strong people. Strong means strong in their knowledge, who are behind these people. Behind Ganapati Shastri also. Ganapati Shastri, who edited, who published all the works of Bhasa and also Arthashastra and brought out many other texts. There also there was scholars, but they are all in the oblivion. That is there. Even then, they have done very good work. Even now, there are people who are who are acclaimed as scholars. Even in Kerala, we find there are people who are acclaimed as very good scholars in Sanskrit, whereas all their published works came from somebody else. Ghostwriting is there. even in Kerala, even now, that is there. But that effort, that publishing effort is there, that is there. So also, sometimes we fail to change our mindset. For example, I say, when describing the period of Kalidasa, we are taking what A.K. Warner said or somebody else, but some scholars who put forth some of the ideas with convincing evidence, just like M.R. Khalid. We are not accepting our scholars, many of the Sanskrit teachers, especially Sahitya teachers, they hesitate to say that Kalidasa lived in the 1st or 2nd century BC, even though M.R. Khalid cited reasons and said that Kalidasa belonged to the period of Shunga dynasty. Even now, our people are teaching that Kalidasa lived in the Gupta period. So our mindset is not changing. So this paradigm shift will come only if we change our mindset. Otherwise, it will not come. Then I understand that you know what is happening. Even now, the introduction of the computer, the field of Sanskrit research has made some very tremendous changes. We can get database of Sanskrit, and also that is at your fingertip. How it happens? Various scholars worked for it, and you are having great scholars, and some of them are doing just like Shivadan of French Institute. Also, Peter Schaff, such people are there. The French people have done a lot of things to promote Indology. We call a franchise the Extreme Orient. Then the French Institute of Indology, they are doing very great service. And also in France, there is that Indria. You can get the forms of a word or a verbal forms of a root just by touching your laptop or your mobile phone. What made this possible? When computer was introduced and somebody said some computer is a very good equipment to promote Sanskrit learning also. And when Rick Briggs said that Sanskrit was the most suited language, natural language for computer, I was also enamored. But who opposed the idea? The scholars, Sanskrit scholars themselves said it is not practicable. You cannot bring Sanskrit to computer. But now what are you seeing? We are seeing that we are having IITs. We are having a triple IIT at Hyderabad. Then we are having the Indian Institute of Science. Everywhere you can see that some Sanskrit program is taken up. Also, they took ideas from Sanskrit and they made machine translation practical. IIT Kanpur, they did a lot of work. IIT Mantras did very, very good work. And people in the field of computer science, say Ramanuja Silak, Chandrakanta Varnekar, then Vinith Chaitanya of IIT, and also Amba Kulkarni, then Malhotra of Mumbai IIT. All these people, they made use of computer and the computer science for the promotion of Sanskrit. Now there is the computational Sanskrit here. That is also a shift, a paradigm shift here. And in Trivandrum, you know, probably a student of Trivandrum, now she is professor in the Karnataka Sanskrit University, Shiva. She had done much work. Even now, she is doing something in computational linguistics. Such people are there. When all these people were hesitating to study computer, to make use of computer in the learning, I was the first person to introduce a computer training for our Sanskrit teachers and students at the Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit College. Then afterwards, many came to that field, many tried to study. Then somebody asked me, how are you fit for making use of computer? Then I said, you may think that I am too old for this new science. Maybe when I was very young, when I was 21 or 22, I tried to learn modern science. Even though I was a science student, I studied much in chemistry, much in physics, much in botany and zoology. Then, and also in medicine, I studied a lot. But now I am not proficient in them. That is there. But I can also learn these computer applications. I may not be able to learn computer science as such, but I may be able to make use of the techniques. Now what happens, even very small children make use of computer. So I ask all our research students, Sanskrit students, not only research students, when you start, because even in the schools, you have computer training. The students have computer training. So you must be conversant with the computer training, the computer that is there. Then Rajesh asked me, can you say something about the modern Sanskrit studies in Europe or in the foreign countries? He asked me. Then I can say, you forget about the old scholars, but at present also there are scholars. Sanskrit is taught at different universities the world around. Does not mean that they are having a lot of students. I don't mean. For example, in USA, several universities have Sanskrit. Probably a Sanskrit department as such may not be there, but there may be a department of South Asian studies. There you are having provision for research. For example, the University of Pennsylvania, you know the Professor Cardona, even now he is working there, I think so. And also our R.K. Sharma, who was the director of Rashtriya Sanskrit Sansthan earlier. I met him there. He was also working there as a professor then, when I visited University of Pennsylvania. Now, one of my friends, Varun Khanna, is also working there. And I have to say that if you want to study there, you can also study, but you should be careful. You should have sufficient knowledge in your language, Sanskrit, as well as in English. You should study TOEFL, and get scores. Then only you can go. Even then, sometimes I do not know how the fees affects you, but the fees may be very high. But government of India is also giving scholarship, I have heard. Then, if you have the resources to study abroad, you can go and study abroad. But the thing is that when you are going applying, you should give a reference of a professor, two professors, one or two professors here, and their opinion may be sought secretly by them by email. I had also recommended this way some students in different parts of both USA and London. I had done so, and one of my students, she is not working earlier. She was working, and she is of middle age, and she joined there as a research scholar in Indian mathematics with Sanskrit base. She studied Sanskrit MA privately. I had the opportunity to teach her some subjects as visiting and online faculty then. And she is doing research there. So there is provision. Then in the University of Berkeley, there is a very knowledgeable professor, Goldman. Goldman is very good in his scholarship and his textbook. He is followed at several places to study Sanskrit, but he is not not in favor of our culture, Hindu culture, because he says that Hindu culture is full of violence because our gods are violent. Rama violent, Krishna violent. I had to tell him that the Greek gods and the Roman gods were more violent than our gods. Our gods were also killing, okay, but whenever they killed, what happened? Their souls came back to that God Almighty. That way. But there, here our gods were forgiving gods. But there, when their gods got angry, they were destroying, just like anything. But he's a very good scholar. Goldman is a very good scholar at Berkeley. Then, Sheldon Pollock. He is Aravind Raghunathan professor. In the name of Aravind Raghunathan, there is a professor post in South Asian Studies at the Department of Middle East and South Asian and African Studies at the Columbia University. And in Canada, the British Columbia University, where there is Ashok Aglutchkar, professor, you may know, Professor Ashok Aglutchkar, who is a very good scholar in Wikipedia. He is there. And Sheldon Pollock, he is also teaching, especially the downtrodden, they say our Dalits. And he is getting funds for that. But some of his views are opposed by Rajiv Malhotra. Rajiv Malhotra is also to be noted. He is a one-man fighter for the cause of Sanskrit in the years. Even if we oppose his ideas, it is better to read him. The battle for Sanskrit, breaking India, being different. These books of Rajiv Malhotra should also be studied, I say. And sometimes he engages Sheldon Pollock also in discussions. Then there are such people. Then You know, conferences go on everywhere. Then Michael Witzel, he is Wales professor of Sanskrit at Harvard University, editor of Harvard Oriental series. He is a Vedic researcher, and he has done extensive research in comparative mythology, etc. Such people are there. Then you know, in India you have Michel Danino. He is of French origin and he teaches at IIT Gandhinagar. He was one of the persons who disputed the Aryan invasion theory. There is a book, The Invasion Never Was. Indian Culture and India's Future, another book. Such books are there. He is from India. Then going to Europe, in several universities, you can study Sanskrit, you can do research. Even there are scholars in Paris. And the University of Vienna, you have a scholar, Karin Presendan, and I was at the Sanskrit University of Kaladi. I invited her to deliver lecture, and also my successors invited her and a team. I was aware of the team, invited them to discuss Charaka Samhita there, textual study of Charaka Samhita. And there was a seminar there where Karin Praise and Dance was there. Then some scholars from Japan, University of Kyoto are there, some scholars. And I met Karin Praise and Dance, Glasshoff, such scholars. Then you know of probably that Malaysian scholar Nakamura and also the Japan scholar Munyo Tungo. Again, some Japanese scholars coming here to India to study toxicology, Vishavidya. Such research are going on there. Then also, you know, Asko Parpolo is an expert in Trivandrum linguistics. Such people are there all over the world. Again, coming to Germany. Germany, 3 or 4 universities offer Sanskrit. And in 2015, because students were very rare, they invited students from different parts of the world to have the preparatory course, the spoken Sanskrit class. There were students from 34. There were students from 34 countries, around 250 or 260 students. And you can have studies there. But now, what prohibits you from studying in a foreign country? One thing, in India, you need not spend much money on higher studies. And in the present world of globalization, when you are having internet everywhere, you can have all the facilities here in itself. But if you have to see a manuscript there at London, to the Oxford University, or if you have to consult something at the Cambridge University, then you have to go there. Because all these manuscripts are not on the internet. It is not possible to put all the manuscripts, even though we had programs to put our manuscripts on internet, we were not successful. Why? Because of the time required as well as the money to be spent and also the human resources required, capable persons. So take into consideration of the number of Sanskrit manuscripts, not only Sanskrit and allied manuscripts all over the world. Huge manpower is required, scholarly manpower is required. That can be done. So a Sanskrit researcher has scope, wide scope. Only thing is that you should have sufficient knowledge, communication skill, sufficient knowledge in Sanskrit, and sufficient communication skill in English also, because you have to travel outside. Sometimes you may be required to know French or German or Japanese. Even in China, there has been interest in Sanskrit. One professor was teaching Sanskrit there. And also our professor Satyavrata Shastri went to China to teach Sanskrit. Not on a regular basis, but at some workshops. That way he went. And in Cambodia, there is interest for Sanskrit. Thailand, everywhere you can see. But how can you make use of the possibilities available there? That is the thing you have to think of. You can get much information from internet. I do not, it is not enough time to discuss too much here. Others have to discuss, others are also there to present the papers. So, with thanks to all of you, I am stopping my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are delighted with your scholarly words, and now we feel that we have traveled around the world, hearing all your words. Hope we all can make these words come true, and all new researchers may come forward to continue their research work in combination with science and Sanskrit. I should say that the most respected Linguists may be the richest man in while considering the asset of students. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, and inviting discussion. If anybody have any doubt or something to say, please do that.
സുധീഷ് അൺമ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്തോ?
ചെയ്യാം, അവർക്കൊക്കെ ചെയ്യാം.
Hello, any discussion?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, of course.
Sir, Gangadharan sir, namaskaram. Sharmayane, Pondicherry.
നമസ്കാരം. ഒരുപാട് കാലമായി നമ്മൾ ഇതിൽ കൂടെ കണ്ടിട്ട് അല്ലേ?
എല്ലാരെയും ലോകം മൊത്തം ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു സഞ്ചാരം നടത്തി വളരെ ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റിംഗും ഇൻഫർമേറ്റീവ് ആയിരുന്നു സാർ. അതിലെ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് എനിക്ക് സ്ട്രൈക്ക് ചെയ്യാത്തൊരു കാര്യം സാറ് പറഞ്ഞപ്പോ, പ്രത്യേകിച്ചും തിരുവനന്തപുരം സംസ്കൃത കോളേജിന് ഒരു ക്രെഡിറ്റ് ഉണ്ടാക്കാനുള്ള ഒരു പ്രത്യേക പോയിന്റ് സാറ് പറഞ്ഞു. അപ്പൊ എനിക്ക് തോന്നി അതൊന്ന് എംഫസൈസ് ചെയ്തേക്കാന്ന് വിചാരിച്ചു. ഒരു നിമിഷം കൊണ്ട് ഞാനത് പറഞ്ഞേക്കാം. അപ്പൊ മറ്റ് ടോപ്പിക്സ് സാറ് സയൻസ് ആൻഡ് ടെക്നോളജി റിലേറ്റഡിൽ സാൻസ്ക്രിറ്റിന്റെ റിലേറ്റഡ് റിസർച്ചിനെ കുറിച്ച് സാറ് വളരെ യൂസ്ഫുള്ളായ കുറേ പോയിന്റ്സ് പറഞ്ഞത്. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ഒരു കാര്യം നമുക്ക് വളരെ ലാക്കിംഗ് ആയിട്ട് തോന്നുന്നത് ഈ അസ്ട്രോണമിയാണ്. സാറ് സൂചിപ്പിച്ചു അത്. അതിൽ കേരളത്തിലെ കോൺട്രിബ്യൂഷൻ വളരെയധികം പ്രസക്തമുള്ളതുമാണ്, പക്ഷെ നെഗ്ലക്റ്റഡുമാണ്. നമ്മൾ കാര്യമായിട്ട് അതിലേക്ക് റിസർച്ചിലേക്ക് ഇറങ്ങിയിട്ടില്ല. പ്രത്യേകിച്ചും കേരളത്തിലെ യങ്സ്റ്റേഴ്സിന് വളരെയധികം പ്രയോജനം ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു ബ്രാഞ്ച് ആയിരിക്കും ഈ അസ്ട്രോണമി ആൻഡ് മാത്തമാറ്റിക്സ്, പ്രത്യേകിച്ചും കേരള അസ്ട്രോണമി ആൻഡ് മാത്തമാറ്റിക്സ്. അപ്പൊ ഇന്നലെ ഇനാഗുറേഷനിൽ ഞാൻ കേട്ടു നിങ്ങൾക്കൊരു പുതിയ കോഴ്സ് BA യോഗ കിട്ടിയിട്ടുണ്ടെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. അപ്പോൾ സാർ ഇന്നത്തെ പ്രസന്റേഷനിൽ കൂടി നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഒരു കോഴ്സിന് കൂടി അപ്ലൈ ചെയ്യത്തക്കവണ്ണം ഒരു കേരള അസ്ട്രോണമി ആൻഡ് മാത്തമാറ്റിക്സ് ഒരു ഗ്രാജുവേഷൻ കൊണ്ടുവന്നാൽ, സാറ് പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ തന്നെ നിയർലി ഒരു സാൻസ്ക്രിറ്റ് അല്ലാതെ നമുക്ക് കുറച്ച് മാത്സ് ഫാക്കൽറ്റിയും ഫിസിക്സ് ഫാക്കൽറ്റിയും സാൻസ്ക്രിറ്റ് ബാക്ക്ഗ്രൗണ്ടോട് കൂടിയുള്ള ആൾക്കാർ തന്നെ ഉണ്ട് നമുക്ക്. അപ്പം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വിസിറ്റിംഗ് സ്കോളേഴ്സ് ആയിട്ട് നമുക്ക് കിട്ടുകയാണെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് നല്ലൊരു കേരള അസ്ട്രോണമി ആൻഡ് മാത്തമാറ്റിക്സിന്റെ പ്രൊമോട്ട് ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ഒരു പോസിബിലിറ്റി നമുക്കുണ്ടാകും. ആൻഡ് ഹോപ്പ്ഫുള്ളി ട്രിവാൻഡ്രം സാൻസ്ക്രിറ്റ് കോളേജ് വിൽ ബി ആൻ ഹബ് ഫോർ ദ ഹോൾ വേൾഡ് ടു സ്റ്റഡി കേരള അസ്ട്രോണമി ആൻഡ് മാത്തമാറ്റിക്സ്. താങ്ക് യു വെരി മച്ച് സാർ. താങ്ക്സ് എ ലോട്ട്.
നല്ല കാര്യമാണ് പറഞ്ഞത്. നമ്മുടെ സംസ്കൃത കോളേജില് ഇതിനെ കുറിച്ചൊക്കെ ഒരു കേന്ദ്രം ഉണ്ടാകുന്ന കൊള്ളാം. ഇപ്പൊ പറഞ്ഞപ്പോഴാണ് എനിക്ക് ഓർമ്മ വന്നത്, ഞാൻ യോഗയുടെ കാര്യം പറഞ്ഞില്ല. യോഗം പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്ന ഒരുപാട് സ്ഥലങ്ങളുണ്ട്. ഈ മൈക്കൽ വിറ്റ്സലിന്റെ പേര് ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു ഞാൻ വിചാരിക്കുന്നത് ഹാർവാർഡ് യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി. അദ്ദേഹം യോഗയ്ക്കും അതുപോലെ തന്നെ പിന്നെ ആയുർവേദത്തിനും വേണ്ടി ഒരുപാട് സ്റ്റഡി നടത്തിയിട്ടുള്ള ആളാണ് വിറ്റ്സൽ. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ
മറന്നുപോകാതിരിക്കാൻ ഒരു പോയിന്റ് പറഞ്ഞേക്കാം സാർ. തിരുവനന്തപുരം സംസ്കൃത കോളേജിന് പ്രയോജനപ്പെടുന്ന രീതിയിൽ നമുക്ക് യോഗയുടെ ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ ഇപ്പോൾ ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ഇതില് പുറത്ത് റിസർച്ച് നടക്കുന്നത് ലണ്ടനിലെ SAOS ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷൻ ആണ്. നമുക്കപ്പോൾ ഈ കോഴ്സ് തുടങ്ങി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നമുക്ക് തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും ഞാൻ അതിന് വേണ്ട കോണ്ടാക്ട്സ് അവർക്ക് സംസ്കൃത കോളേജിന് ഉണ്ടാക്കി കൊടുക്കാം. സോ സം സോർട്ട് ഓഫ് എക്സ്ചേഞ്ച് മേ ബി അവിടെ നിന്ന് നമുക്ക് ഗസ്റ്റ് ഫാക്കൽറ്റി ഇങ്ങോട്ട് വിളിക്കുകയോ ഈവൻ ഫ്രീ ആയിട്ട് തന്നെ നമുക്ക് ടീച്ചിങ്ങിനുള്ള പോസിബിലിറ്റീസ് കിട്ടും. നമുക്കപ്പോൾ BA കോഴ്സ് യോഗയിൽ തുടങ്ങിക്കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നമുക്ക് അങ്ങോട്ടും ഇങ്ങോട്ടുള്ള ഒരു സ്റ്റുഡന്റ് എക്സ്ചേഞ്ചോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഫാക്കൽറ്റി എക്സ്ചേഞ്ചോ വരെ നമുക്ക് പ്ലാൻ ചെയ്യാം. സോറി സാർ, സോറി ഫോർ ഇന്ററപ്ഷൻ.
നന്നായി. കാരണം ഇപ്പൊ യോഗയില് ഒരുപാട് ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ് നടക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. USA കൃപാലു ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂട്ട് ഉണ്ട്. അവര് യോഗയുടെ അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഈ സ്കൂളിലൊക്കെ പഠിക്കുന്ന കുട്ടികൾ ഇപ്പൊ ഡ്രഗ് അഡിക്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് മാറുന്നു. ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള പ്രോബ്ലം, ഓൾ ദീസ് പ്രോബ്ലംസ് ആർ പെർസിസ്റ്റിംഗ് ഇൻ US ഓൾസോ. അവിടെ ഉണ്ട്. അതിനൊക്കെ അധികം കേൾക്കുന്നില്ലേ? അവിടെ ഒരു സീനിയർ, നമ്മുടെ ഒരു വയസ്സായൊരു സീനുണ്ട്. അദ്ദേഹം ഇതെല്ലാം കോർഡിനേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. ഞാൻ പണ്ട് അവിടെ ഫസ്റ്റ് ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ കോൺഫറൻസ് ഓൺ യോഗ നടന്നപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ അവിടെ ഒരു പ്രഭാഷണം നടത്തി ഗവൺമെന്റിന്റെ പ്രസിഡന്റായിട്ട് പങ്കെടുത്തിരുന്നു. ഞാൻ ഇവരെ എല്ലാം പരിചയപ്പെട്ടു. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ നമ്മുടെ ഇപ്പോൾ പിന്നെ ഉത്തരാഖണ്ഡിലെ യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റികളിൽ പോലും നല്ല റിസർച്ച് നടക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. അപ്പൊ അതിന് ഈ റിസർച്ചിന് പോകുമ്പോൾ യോഗ പഠിക്കുമ്പോൾ സംസ്കൃതത്തിന്റെ അറിവ് കൂടെ വേണം. സംസ്കൃതം നല്ല അറിവോടുകൂടി വേണം. അതാണ് ബുദ്ധിമുട്ട്. ഇപ്പൊ ഒരു ക്ലിനിക്കൽ സൈഡ് കൂടെയുള്ള യോഗയാണ് അവിടെ പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്ന ഉപയോഗപ്പെടും. ക്ലിനിക്കൽ സൈഡ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ നമ്മൾ സൈക്കോളജി, ക്ലിനിക്കൽ സൈക്കോളജി ഉണ്ട്, എല്ലാ സൈക്കോളജി ഉണ്ട്. ക്ലിനിക്കൽ സൈക്കോളജി ഉള്ള ആൾക്ക് മെഡിസിൻ കൊടുക്കാമല്ലോ സാധാരണഗതിക്ക്, മെന്റൽ ഡിസീസ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ നമ്മൾ അതുപോലെയുള്ള ട്രെയിനിങ്, ഹൗ ദ ബ്രെയിൻ വർക്ക്സ് എന്നുള്ളതിനെ കുറിച്ചും ഒക്കെ നടക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, റിസർച്ച് ഒക്കെ നടക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. അതിനും നമുക്ക് നല്ല ചാൻസ് ഉണ്ട് ഈ യോഗ പഠിച്ചു പോയാൽ. പക്ഷെ ഒറ്റ ഒരു കാര്യം, യോഗ പഠിക്കുക യോഗാസനം മാത്രം പഠിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് അങ്ങോട്ട് പോകരുത്. യോഗശാസ്ത്രങ്ങൾ അതുപോലെ തന്നെ മറ്റ് യോഗയൊക്കെ ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ അതിന്റെ ഇഫക്റ്റ് എന്താണെന്നും മനസ്സിലാക്കണം. ആ രീതിയിലുള്ള ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റ് വേണം. ഇപ്പൊ ഞാൻ ഒരിടത്ത് കണ്ടു, ഒരു നൗളി ഒക്കെ ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ, നേതിയൊക്കെ ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ, സൂത്രനേതിയൊക്കെ ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ അതിന്റെ ഇഫക്റ്റ് എന്താണ്, അതുപോലെ തന്നെ പ്രാണായാമം ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ അതിന്റെ ഇഫക്റ്റ് എന്താണ്, അത് ഞാൻ പണ്ട് എൻ്റെ ആചാര്യന്മാരിൽ പഠിച്ചതേ ഉള്ളൂ. അതിനെക്കുറിച്ചാണ് ഞാൻ അവിടെ പറഞ്ഞത്. പക്ഷെ അവര് പ്രാക്ടിക്കലായിട്ട് ചെയ്ത് നോക്കി എല്ലാം അളന്ന് ശരീരത്തിൽ ടെസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്ത് അവർ പഠിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെയുള്ള എല്ലാ ഗുണങ്ങളും കിട്ടും. പക്ഷെ ഒരേ ഒരു കാര്യം, എന്താണ് ഇത് ആരാണോ ഇതിന്റെ പുറകെ പോകുന്നത് അവർ സ്റ്റുഡിയസ് ആയി ശരിയായ സ്റ്റുഡൻസ് ആയിരിക്കണം ഞാൻ പറയാം. എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ താല്പര്യത്തോടു കൂടി പഠിക്കണം, അല്ലാതെ ഡിഗ്രി പാസ്സാകാൻ വേണ്ടി പഠിക്കുകയില്ല. ഡിഗ്രി കിട്ടും, തന്നെ പുറകെ വരും ഡിഗ്രി. പക്ഷെ പഠിക്കുക, നല്ലവണ്ണം പഠിക്കണം. അത് നമ്മുടെ സംസ്കൃതത്തിന്റെ ഏത് രംഗത്താണെങ്കിലും നല്ലപോലെ പഠിക്കണം എന്നുള്ളൊരു പ്രധാന കാര്യമാണ്.
നന്ദി സർ.
ഹലോ
പറയൂ സർ.
ഹലോ, പറഞ്ഞോളൂ. നീലകണ്ഠ കാണുന്നുണ്ട്, നീലകണ്ഠനെ കാണുന്ന ഒരുപാട് കാലമായില്ല കണ്ടിട്ട്. എന്താണ് വിശേഷം?
സന്തോഷം. ഞാനിതിന്റെ തുടക്കത്തിൽ അത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് എനിക്ക് വേറെ കുറച്ച് എൻഗേജ്മെന്റ് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു, അതുകൊണ്ട് ലാസ്റ്റ് പാർട്ടാണ് പിന്നെ കേട്ടത്. എന്റെ സുഹൃത്ത് ശർമ്മ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ അതൊരു വളരെ നല്ല ഒരു ഓവർവ്യൂ. തിരുവനന്തപുരം ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ട്, തിരുവനന്തപുരം സംസ്കൃത കോളേജ് ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് ഇങ്ങനെ കുറെ ഇന്റൻസീവ് റിസർച്ചിനെ കുറിച്ചും വേൾഡ് വൈഡ് നോളേജ് കോണ്ടാക്റ്റിനെ കുറിച്ചും ഒരു ചിന്തകള് ഉണ്ടായത് വളരെ നന്നായി. അത് ഇനിയും 2-3 ദിവസം നടക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. എനിക്കൊരു കാര്യം, യങ് ജനറേഷൻ, ഇപ്പൊ ഞങ്ങളൊക്കെ, ഞാനും ഗംഗാര സാറൊക്കെ ഇങ്ങോട്ട് സായാഹ്നത്തിലേക്ക് എത്തിയല്ലോ. യങ് ജനറേഷൻ.
അയ്യോ നീലകണ്ഠ അങ്ങനെ പറയുന്നത്. നീലകണ്ഠന് എന്റെ പ്രായമാണ്, കുറച്ചും കൂടെ പോണം. നിങ്ങളൊക്കെ യങ്സ്റ്റേഴ്സ്, യു ആർ ഓൾ യങ്സ്റ്റേഴ്സ്. ഇനിയും കാര്യം ചെയ്യാനുണ്ട്. നമ്മളെ
അതിലും ധർമ്മയും ഞങ്ങളൊക്കെ കൂടി എപ്പോഴും ഒരു കാര്യമാണ്. തിരുവനന്തപുരം ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള മാൻസ്ക്രിപ്റ്റ് ലൈബ്രറിയുടെ അവിടുത്തെ ഒരു വർക്ക് തിരുവനന്തപുരം ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ട്, പ്രത്യേകിച്ചും കേരള ഇന്ത്യ ആവശ്യമുണ്ട്, പക്ഷെ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ഈ കോണ്ടെക്സ്റ്റില് തിരുവനന്തപുരം ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള അവിടുത്തെ ഒരു വർക്ക് ഒന്ന് സ്ട്രെങ്തൻ ചെയ്യേണ്ടത് വലിയ ആവശ്യമാണ്. ഇപ്പോൾ 1-2 ഉദാഹരണം ഞാൻ ഇപ്പൊ തന്നെ ഇത് തുടങ്ങിയിട്ട് വേറെ ഒരു ഡിസ്കഷനിൽ എൻ്റർ ചെയ്തത് നാട്യശാസ്ത്രത്തെ കുറിച്ചൊരു ഡിസ്കഷനിലായിരുന്നു. അപ്പൊ നാട്യശാസ്ത്രം എന്ന് പറയുന്ന സാധനത്തിന്റെ അഭിനവ ഭാരതി GOS ഒരു എഡിഷൻ വന്നിട്ട് 50 കൊല്ലം കഴിയാണ്. GOS എഡിഷൻ വന്നിട്ട് 50 കൊല്ലം കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടും ഇവിടെ അഭിനവ ഭാരതിയുടെ ഒരു റിവൈസ്ഡ് എഡിഷൻ ഇതേവരെ വരാൻ പറ്റിയിട്ടില്ല. അത് നാട്യശാസ്ത്രത്തിന്റെ സ്റ്റഡി വേൾഡ് വളരെ 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 മുന്നോട്ട് പോയി. കൂടിയാട്ടവും കഥകളിയൊക്കെ ലോകം മുഴുവൻ എത്തി. അതിൻ്റെയൊക്കെ ബേസ് അതിനൊരു റിവൈസ്ഡ് എഡിഷൻ. ഞാൻ ഒരു 4 കൊല്ലം മുമ്പ് IGNCAയിൽ ഒരു കമ്മിറ്റിയിൽ ഉണ്ടാവുമ്പോൾ ഒരു പ്രപ്പോസൽ കൊടുത്തു. ആ പ്രപ്പോസൽ 2 മീറ്റിംഗ് കൂടി, പക്ഷെ മുന്നോട്ട് പോയില്ല. അപ്പോ ഇത്തരം കാര്യങ്ങളിൽ അവിടെ തിരുവനന്തപുരം മാസിക് ലൈബ്രറിയിൽ മാൻസ്ക്രിപ്റ്റ് ലഭിക്കാനും അത് സ്റ്റഡി ചെയ്യാനും അത് ആക്സസ് ചെയ്യാനും അത് സ്റ്റഡി ചെയ്യാനും ഒക്കെ ആയിട്ടുള്ള കുറച്ചുകൂടി ഫീസിബിൾ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു അന്തരീക്ഷം ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ ഇപ്പൊ രാജേഷ് ഇത് കോർഡിനേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്ന രാജേഷ് സിൻഡിക്കേറ്റ് മെമ്പർ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ആളാണ്. പിന്നെ ഗംഗാന സാർക്ക് ഹൈ ലെവലിൽ ഒരുപാട് ഇൻഫ്ലുവൻസ് ചെലുത്താൻ സാധിക്കും. അങ്ങനെ ഒന്ന് കോർഡിനേറ്റ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് അവിടുത്തെ മാൻസ്ക്രിപ്റ്റ് ബേസ്ഡ് സ്റ്റഡീസും എഡിഷൻസും ഒന്നുകൂടി സ്ട്രെങ്തൻ ചെയ്യാൻ ഒരു കൂട്ടായ പ്രവർത്തനം ഉണ്ടാകണമെന്ന് ഈ സന്ദർഭത്തിൽ. അപ്പോൾ മലയാളത്തിലാണെങ്കിലും നാട്യശാസ്ത്രം ഇത്രയൊക്കെ കേരളത്തിൽ ഇത്രയൊക്കെ വലിയ ഒരു ഇൻഫ്ലുവൻസ് ചെലുത്തിയ ടെക്സ്റ്റ് ആണെങ്കിലും 50കളിൽ ഷാരടി മാഷ് മലയാളത്തിൽ കൊണ്ടുവന്നൊരു ടെക്സ്റ്റ് എപ്പോഴും നമുക്കുള്ളൂ. ഒരു റിവൈസ്ഡ് മലയാളം എഡിഷനോ റിവൈസ്ഡ് അഭിനവ ഭാരതിയോട് കൂടിയ ഒരു എഡിഷനോ വരാൻ ഞാൻ ഒരൊറ്റ ഉദാഹരണം ഇപ്പൊ ഞാനൊരു ഡിസ്കഷനിൽ പങ്കെടുത്തത് വെച്ചിട്ട്. അപ്പൊ ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരുപാട് വർക്ക് നമുക്ക് പ്രയോജനപ്രദമായിട്ട് ചെയ്യാനുണ്ട്. മാൻസ്ക്രിപ്റ്റിനെ ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടും റിവൈസ്ഡ് എഡിഷനായിട്ടും ക്രിട്ടിക്കൽ എഡിഷനായിട്ടും. അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെ കൂടി ഒരു ചാനലിലേക്ക് തിരുവനന്തപുരം ബേസ്ഡ് ഗ്രൂപ്പ് അവിടെ ഈ മാൻസ്ക്രിപ്റ്റിനെ ലൈബ്രറി ആയിട്ട് കൂടുതൽ ഓറിയന്റൽ മാൻസ്ക്രിപ്റ്റ് ലൈബ്രറി ആയിട്ട് കൂടുതൽ ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട് കൂടുതൽ സ്ട്രെങ്തൻ ചെയ്ത് അവിടെ നമ്മൾ ഇടപെട്ട് അവിടുത്തെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ആക്സസ് ചെയ്യാനും അത് കുട്ടികൾക്ക് ഗവേഷകർക്ക് ആവശ്യമുള്ളത് കിട്ടാനും ഉപയോഗിക്കാനും ഒക്കെയുള്ള ഇതായിട്ട് അങ്ങനെ ഒരു കാര്യമാണ് എനിക്ക് ഇതിനെ സപ്ലിമെന്റ് ആയിട്ട് പറയാനുള്ളത്. ഗംഗാധര സാറൊക്കെ മുകളിൽ നിന്ന് അനുഭവങ്ങളും ധാരാളം കോണ്ടാക്റ്റും ഉള്ള ആളാണ്. ശർമ്മ ഞങ്ങളൊക്കെ പറ്റണ പോലെ ഉണ്ടാവും. യങ്സ്റ്റേഴ്സിന് അതിനൊരു ഊർജം സ്വയം ഏറ്റെടുക്കുകയാണ്. ഇതാണ് എനിക്ക് ആഡ് ചെയ്യാനുള്ളത്. വളരെ സന്തോഷം.
താങ്ക് യു സാർ. താങ്ക് യു.
നീലകണ്ഠം നീലകണ്ഠം പറഞ്ഞ നല്ല കാര്യം. അപ്പൊ എനിക്ക് അപ്പോഴാണ് പറ്റി യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റിയുള്ള ഒരു ഇന്ത്യക്കാരൻ സോമദേവ വാസുദേവൻ പലത് സ്റ്റഡി ചെയ്ത് സോമദേവ വാസുദേവ. എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നത് അവിടെ ഫ്രഞ്ച് ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂട്ടിൽ പ്രസിദ്ധീകരിച്ചിട്ടില്ലേ അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ?
അതെ,
സോമദേവ വാസുദേവനെ
ബെസ്റ്റ് സ്കോളർ. അതെ, വെരി ഗുഡ് സ്കോളർ.
അങ്ങനെ ആളുകളുണ്ട്, പല സ്ഥലങ്ങളിലുണ്ട്, നമുക്ക് ഉപയോഗപ്പെടുത്താം. അഭിനവ ഗുപ്തനെ പറ്റി നല്ല സ്റ്റഡി ചെയ്തു.
താങ്ക് യു സോ മച്ച്. ലോകം നിറഞ്ഞ യശസ്സുള്ള മക്കള് അമ്മമാർക്കും അച്ഛന്മാർക്കും വലിയൊരു ഭാഗ്യമാണ്. ഇപ്പോ എസ് എ ശർമ്മ സാറിന്റെ ഓരോ കാര്യങ്ങൾ കേൾക്കുമ്പോൾ, അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ അഭിപ്രായങ്ങൾ കേൾക്കുമ്പോൾ ഈ സംസ്കൃത കോളേജ് എത്ര ഭാഗ്യവതിയാണെന്നാണ് ചിന്തിക്കുന്നത്. ഞാനൊരു സ്ത്രീയായി തന്നെ സംസ്കൃത കോളേജിനെ ഓർക്കുകയാണ്. വലിയ അഭിമാനം. ഞങ്ങളെ കൊണ്ട് പറ്റുന്നത് പോലെയൊക്കെ, ഞങ്ങൾ കുറെ പുതിയ ആൾക്കാർ വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്, ഞങ്ങളെ കൊണ്ട് പറ്റുന്നത് പോലെയൊക്കെ നിങ്ങളുടെയൊക്കെ ഒരു സപ്പോർട്ടോട് കൂടി കഴിയുന്നത്ര എന്താ പറയാ സാൻസ്ക്രിറ്റ് അക്കാഡമിക്സിന് നമ്മളെ കൊണ്ട് പറ്റുന്ന എല്ലാ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളും ചെയ്യാൻ ഞങ്ങൾ പരിശ്രമിക്കും. അതിന് ഇപ്പൊ കോർഡിനേഷൻ ചെയ്ത രാജേഷ് സാറും നമ്മുടെ പ്രിൻസിപ്പൽ ടീച്ചറും ഉണ്ണികൃഷ്ണൻ സാറും ഒക്കെ മുന്നിലുണ്ടാവുമെന്ന് ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ഉറപ്പുണ്ട്. ഒപ്പം ഇപ്പൊ കോളേജിന് പുറത്ത് നിൽക്കുന്നെങ്കിലും കോളേജിന്റെ യഥാർത്ഥ അംഗങ്ങളായ അലുമിനിയും ഒക്കെ ഞങ്ങളുടെ കൂടെ ഉണ്ടാവും അറിയാം. ഗുരുക്കന്മാര് നീലകണ്ഠൻ സാറും ഗംഗാധരൻ സാറും ഒക്കെ ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ഒപ്പം ഉണ്ടെന്നുള്ള ധൈര്യവും ഞങ്ങൾക്കുണ്ട്.
ഞാൻ സംസ്കൃത കോളേജിലാണ് പഠിച്ചിരുന്നെന്ന് അറിയാമോ?
അയ്യോ, അറിയില്ല സർ.
ഞാൻ സംസ്കൃത കോളേജിൽ പഠിച്ചിരുന്ന ആളുമാണ്. അവിടെ 70-79 വരെ അവിടെ ലെക്ചറായിരുന്നു. അതുപോലെ സംസ്കൃത കോളേജിന്റെ പല കാര്യങ്ങളും ആസൂത്രണം ചെയ്യുന്നതിൽ വലിയ പങ്ക് വഹിച്ചിട്ടുള്ള ആളാണ് ഞാൻ. അതൊക്കെ അന്നത്തെ തലമുറയ്ക്ക് അറിയാം, അന്നത്തെ ശിഷ്യന്മാർക്ക്. ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ ആൾക്കാർക്ക് പറഞ്ഞുകൂടാ. അന്ന് അങ്ങനെ
സാറിന്റെ സംഭാവന വളരെ വലുതാണെന്നുള്ളത് നമ്മളും കേട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. പുതുതായിട്ട് വരുമ്പോ ഇതിന്റെ സംസ്കൃത കോളേജിന്റെ ചരിത്രം കേൾക്കുമ്പോൾ പലരും പറഞ്ഞിങ്ങനെ തരാറുണ്ട്. മുന്നിൽ നിന്നുകൊണ്ട് സംസ്കൃത കോളേജിനെ ഗൈഡ് ചെയ്തത് സാറൊക്കെയാണെന്ന്. വളരെ സന്തോഷം സർ. ഇത്ര ശരിക്കും ലോകം ചുറ്റിക്കറങ്ങി വന്നതുപോലെ ഒരുപാട് പുതിയ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഞങ്ങൾക്കൊക്കെ കേൾക്കാൻ പറ്റി. പുതിയ ആളുകളൊക്കെ ശരിക്കും വല്ലാതെ ഇൻസ്പയർഡ് ആയിട്ടുണ്ടാവും എന്ന് വിശ്വസിക്കുന്നു.
അതെ, എനിക്ക് ഒന്നും കൂടെ പറയട്ടെ. എനിക്ക് പറയാൻ പറ്റിയത്, എന്റെ സ്റ്റുഡൻസ് പല രാജ്യങ്ങളിലും ഉണ്ട്. ഇംഗ്ലണ്ടിലുണ്ട്, USA-യിലുണ്ട്, ജർമ്മനിയിലുണ്ട്, പിന്നെ ആസ്ട്രേലിയയിലുണ്ട്. ഇവിടെയൊക്കെ ഉള്ളത് കൊണ്ടാണ് പലരുമായിട്ട് ഇപ്പൊ കോണ്ടാക്ട് ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ പോലും. അതുപോലെ അവിടെ പഠിക്കാൻ പോകുന്ന പല ആളുകളും റെക്കമെൻഡേഷൻ എന്നെയാണ് റെഫറി ആയിട്ട് വയ്ക്കുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് മെയിൽ വരും. കുറച്ചുപേര് പോയി ചേരും, കുറച്ചുപേര് വേണ്ടാന്ന് വയ്ക്കും. അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെയാണ്. എനിക്ക് അങ്ങനെ ഒരു കണക്ഷൻ ഉണ്ട്. ഇനി എത്ര കാലം ഇതുണ്ടാകും, ഞാൻ വയസ്സായില്ലേ, അത് വേറെ കാര്യം. എങ്കിലും അതെ, നൂതനമായിട്ടുള്ള വിഷയങ്ങളെല്ലാം പഠിക്കണമെന്ന് ആഗ്രഹമുണ്ട്, എത്തുന്നില്ല, അത്രയേ ഉള്ളൂ. ശരി.
ഇനി ഒരു പേപ്പർ പ്രസന്റേഷൻ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നത് ഡോക്ടർ പ്രദീപ് വർമ്മ സാറിന്റെ ആയിരുന്നു. സാറിന് ചില നെറ്റ്വർക്ക് ഇഷ്യൂസ് കാരണം നമ്മളുടെ കൂടെ ജോയിൻ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ല. അതുകൊണ്ട് സാറിന്റെ സെഷൻ ഇനി ഒരു ദിവസത്തേക്ക് മാറ്റി വെക്കുകയാണ്. അതുകൊണ്ട് ഈ സെഷൻ വൈൻഡപ്പ് ചെയ്യുന്നതിന്റെ ഭാഗമായി നന്ദി പ്രകാശിപ്പിക്കുന്നതിനായി ഹരിനാരായണൻ സാറിനെ സാദരം സവിനയം ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു. ഹരി സാർ.
ഹരിഭാഷത്തില്ലേ?
ഞാൻ കണ്ടല്ലോ.
ഉണ്ട്, ഞാൻ കണ്ടു.
ഹലോ ഹലോ കേൾക്കാമോ?
കേൾക്കാം കേൾക്കാം.
കേൾക്കാം,
കേൾക്കാം
പറഞ്ഞോളൂ.
സർ.
താങ്ക് യു. വീഡിയോ ഓൺ ചെയ്ത റേഞ്ച് കുറവാണ്.
അവിടെ അവിടെ
സർവേഷാം നമസ്കാരः. യം പ്രവിശ്യ മമ വാചമിമാം പ്രസുപ്താം സഞ്ജീവയത്യഖിലശക്തിധരസ്വധാംനാം അന്യേജാസ്തൈകളച്ചരണത്വഗാദീൻ പ്രാണന്നമോ ഭഗവതേ പുരുഷായ തുഭ്യം. കൃതജ്ഞതാഭാഷണമേവ മമ കർത്തവ്യം. अस्य कार्यक्रमस्य द्वितीयं दिनम् इदानीं परिसमाप्तम्. अस्मिन् सन्दर्भे कृतज्ञताभाषणमेव मम कर्तव्यम्. अस्य कार्यक्रमे अद्य प्रबन्धद्वयम् अत्र प्रस्तावितम्. आदौ डोमिनिक् गुडाल् महाभागः प्रबन्धम् अत्र अवतारितम्. प्रबन्धेऽस्मिन् आदौ शैवसिद्धान्तस्य प्राधान्यं, केरलीय शास्त्र विशिष्य तन्त्रशास्त्र ग्रन्थानां च परिचयः अत्र कृतः. तदा एवमेवम् अन्यशास्त्राणां सर्वकलाशालानां च परिचयः कृतः. विविध सर्वकलाशालासु इदानीं विविध विषयाणां परिचयः कृतः. तेभ्यः महाभागाय IPSC नाम्नि महाविद्यालयस्य नाम्नि अन्येषां सर्वेषां नाम्नि कृतज्ञतां व्याहरामि. अनन्तरं डॉक्टर् गङ्गाधरं महाभागाः, अयं महाभागः भाषाकुटुम्बानां परिचयः अत्र देयः. अनन्तरं भारतीयशास्त्राणां लोकशास्त्राणां च परिचयः कृतः. संस्कृतभाषायाः तथा संस्कृतशास्त्रग्रन्थानां च विविध भाषा ग्रन्थैः सह कथं वर्तते इत्यस्मिन् विषये विशिष्य केरलीय योगदानं, केरळे गणितशास्त्रस्य संगमगिराममाधवस्य निर्मारोहः भारतीय गणितशास्त्रैः तथा आधुनिक गणितशास्त्रैः सह को वा सम्बन्धः, तस्य प्रयोजनं किम् इत्यादि विषये अपि निपुणतरम् अत्र उपवादितं वर्तते. तेभ्यः महाभागेभ्यः विद्यालयस्य नाम्नि ऐक्यस्य नाम्नि तथा सर्वेषां नाम्नि मम नाम्नि कृतज्ञतां व्याहरामि। अनन्तरम् अस्मिन् सन्दर्भे नीलकण्ठमहाभागाः, शर्मा महाभागाः एवं बहुमन्याः इतरे सर्वेषां पुनरपि कृतज्ञतां व्याहरामि। അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഇന്ന് ഈ ചർച്ചയുടെ അവസാനം ശർമ്മ സാറും അതുപോലെ തന്നെ നീലകണ്ഠ സാറും നല്ല നല്ല വാക്കുകൾ പറഞ്ഞു. അതായത് നമ്മുടെ യോഗ കോഴ്സുമായിട്ട് ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട് നമുക്ക് വേണ്ടുന്ന എല്ലാവിധ സഹകരണങ്ങളും നൽകാം എന്ന് ശർമ്മ സാറും അതുപോലെ തന്നെ നീലകണ്ഠ സാറും ഗംഗാധര സാറും ഒക്കെ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് എടുത്തു പറഞ്ഞു. അവരുടെ സഹകരണം ആത്മാർത്ഥമായി നമ്മൾ പ്രതീക്ഷിക്കുന്നു. അവരുടെ ഉപദേശങ്ങളും എല്ലാം നമ്മൾ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നു. ഒന്നുകൂടി എല്ലാവർക്കും നന്ദി അറിയിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് നന്ദി, നമസ്കാരം. ജയതു സംസ്കൃതം, ജയതു ഭാരതം. കേൾക്കായിരുന്നോ?
കേൾക്കാം സർ. നമുക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും നന്ദി പറഞ്ഞ ഹരിനാരായൺ സാറിനുള്ള ഹൃദയം നിറഞ്ഞ നന്ദി രേഖപ്പെടുത്തട്ടെ. രാജേഷ് സാറെ വൈൻഡപ്പ് ചെയ്തേക്കാണല്ലോ. അപ്പോ രാജേഷ് സാർ കേൾക്കുന്നില്ല എന്ന് തോന്നുന്നുണ്ട്.
രാജേഷ് സാർ
നെറ്റ്വർക്ക് ഇഷ്യൂ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. സാറില്ല, ഇനി വേറെ സെഷൻസ് ഒന്നും ഇല്ലാത്തത് കൊണ്ട് ഇന്നത്തെ രണ്ടാം ദിവസത്തെ ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ വെബിനാർ സെഷൻ ഇവിടെ സമാപിക്കുകയാണ്. നാളെ വീണ്ടും രാവിലെ 10 മണിക്ക് നമുക്ക് വീണ്ടും കാണാം. നന്ദി, നമസ്കാരം.